The woman stumbling off that stagecoach looked like she'd crawled through hell itself. Torn dress hanging in strips. Dirt caked so thick you couldn't tell what color her hair used to be. The whole town of Redemption, Arizona gathered to watch the mail-order bride arrive, expecting some proper lady from back east. Instead, they got this, a half-starved creature who could barely stand. The rancher who'd sent for her just stood there, dust swirling around his boots. Everyone waited for him to turn away, to send her right back where she came from. What happened next? Nobody in that frontier town would ever forget it. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside Miller's General Store, and Celeste Whitaker knew her life was about to end. Not literally, though God knew she'd come close enough to death these past 3 days. The bandits who'd stopped them outside Tucson had taken everything. Her trunk with the 2 decent dresses she owned, the small bag of coins she'd saved for 3 years, even the shoes her mother had left her before the fever took her. They'd left Celeste with nothing but the clothes on her back, and those had been torn half off during the struggle when she'd tried to stop them from taking her mother's silver locket. She'd failed at that too. Through the stagecoach window, she could see them gathering. The whole damn town looked like. Women in clean dresses holding parasols against the brutal Arizona sun. Men in pressed shirts, despite the dust that covered everything out here. Children pointing, all of them waiting to see what kind of woman had answered Wyatt Mercer's advertisement for a wife. All of them about to be deeply disappointed. "Miss, we're here." The driver's voice carried the particular tone people used when they felt sorry for you but didn't want to get too involved. She'd heard that tone a lot in her life. Celeste pressed her palm against the locket's absence, the bare skin of her throat where it should have hung. Then she pushed open the door. The heat hit her first, that dry, crushing Arizona heat that sucked the moisture right out of your lungs. Then came the stares. She heard the gasps, the whispers starting up like wind through dead grass. Lord have mercy. Is that supposed to be? Poor Wyatt Mercer. Imagine sending all the way to St. Louis for that. Celeste's legs shook as she climbed down. She hadn't eaten anything but hardtack and water for 3 days. The bandits had taken the food basket the stagecoach line provided, and she'd been too ashamed to ask the other passengers to share. One of them, a banker's wife from Tucson, had made it clear she'd rather die than break bread with someone who looked like a vagrant. Her feet hit the dirt, and she stumbled, caught herself, straightened up even though everything in her wanted to curl into a ball right there in the street. The crowd parted. A man walked through. She'd seen his photograph, the one he'd included with his 3rd letter. It hadn't done him justice. Wyatt Mercer stood about 6'2", broad across the shoulders in a way that spoke of hard work rather than fat. His face was weathered, lined at the eyes from squinting into sun and distance. Maybe 35, maybe 40. Dark hair touched with early gray at the temples. He wore dusty canvas pants, scuffed boots, a shirt that had seen better days but was clean. Everything about him said working man. Everything about her said disaster. Their eyes met. His were dark brown, unreadable. She watched them travel from her face down to her torn dress, the fabric hanging in strips where the bandits had grabbed at her, to her bare, blistered feet, back up to her face. This was it, the moment he'd tell her to get back on the stagecoach, the moment he'd demand his letters back, the promises they'd written to each other over 6 months of careful correspondence. She'd poured her heart into those letters, told him about her dreams, her fears, her desperate need to escape St. Louis, where she'd been working 16 hours a day in a textile factory and still couldn't afford to eat more than once a day. He'd written back with words that had seemed too good to be true. Come west. I have land, cattle, a home that needs a woman's touch. I won't promise you luxury, but I'll promise you'll never go hungry. You'll never be cold. You'll never be afraid. She'd believed him because she'd wanted to, because she'd had nothing left to lose. Turned out she'd been wrong about that last part. Miss Whitaker? His voice was rough, deep, not unkind, but not warm either. Careful. I'm Wyatt Mercer. I know. Her own voice came out barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The bandits, they took everything. I tried to stop them. I swear I tried. Were you hurt? The question caught her off guard. What? The bandits, did they hurt you? His eyes had sharpened, something dangerous flickering behind them. No. They just took my things, my clothes, my money. Her voice cracked. My mother's locket. It was all I had left of her. The crowd was loving this. She could hear their whispers growing louder, more excited. This was better than a traveling show, better than a church social. The pathetic mail-order bride and the rancher who'd gotten more than he bargained for. Wyatt's jaw tightened. He turned slowly, scanning the crowd that had gathered. When he spoke, his voice carried. Seems like everybody in Redemption's got time to stand around gawking today instead of working. He let the words hang there, let the silence stretch. That's fine. While you're all here, let me introduce you to my fiancée, Miss Celeste Whitaker of St. Louis, Missouri. Celeste's head snapped up. Fiancée? He was still calling her that? A woman in a blue dress, probably mid-40s, face pinched like she'd been sucking on something sour her whole life, stepped forward. Now, Wyatt, surely you can see that this woman isn't suitable for what, Mrs. Bartlett? Wyatt's voice had gone quiet. Dangerous quiet. For being human? For having the misfortune of being robbed? For having the courage to travel 2,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met? He paused. Or is she not suitable because she doesn't measure up to your standards of what a woman should look like after 3 days of hell? Mrs. Bartlett's face flushed red. I'm just saying that a man of your standing— My standing? Wyatt actually laughed, though there wasn't much humor in it. Lady, I'm a cattleman with dirt under my fingernails and calluses on my hands. I live 20 miles outside of town in a house I built myself. I work from sunup to sundown and sometimes through the night. What exactly about that sounds like I need someone who's afraid of getting dirty? He turned back to Celeste. The hardness in his eyes softened slightly. Miss Whitaker, have you eaten today? The question was so simple, so practical, that it nearly broke her. She shook her head. Yesterday? Another shake. Day before? Hardtack. On the stagecoach. Something flickered across his face. Anger, but not at her. He turned to a nervous-looking man standing by the general store. Miller, you still serving hot food? Yes, sir, Mr. Mercer. We got stew and biscuits. Good. Send 2 bowls to the hotel dining room and strong coffee. He reached into his pocket, pulled out coins without counting them. Whatever the lady wants after that, put it on my account. Wyatt, I can't— Celeste started. You can and you will. He said it firmly but not harshly. Then he did something that made the entire crowd gasp. He shrugged out of his jacket, dusty as it was, and draped it around her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, and it smelled like leather and sun-baked sage. Come on, let's get you fed. But I'm filthy. So am I most days. He offered his arm like she was dressed in silk instead of rags. The hotel's just across the street. Celeste stared at his arm, at this man who had every right to reject her, humiliate her, send her packing. Instead, he was treating her like she mattered. She took his arm. They walked through that crowd with every eye burning into them. Celeste kept her head down, but Wyatt's remained high, steady. When they reached the hotel, a 2-story building that probably looked grand by Redemption standards, he held the door open for her. The dining room went quiet when they entered. A few traveling salesmen at one table, a family at another, all of them staring. Wyatt led her to a corner table, pulled out her chair himself, waited until she sat before taking his own seat. I should clean up first, Celeste whispered. I'm making your jacket dirty. It's been dirty before. It'll be dirty again. He poured her water from the pitcher on the table. Drink, slowly. You're dehydrated. She drank. The water was lukewarm and tasted faintly of minerals, but it was the best thing she'd had in days. She wanted to gulp it down, drain the whole pitcher, but his words made her pace herself. The letters, she said quietly. The ones I sent you. I wasn't lying about who I am, what I want. I know. But you look like someone who got robbed by bandits and spent 3 days in hell. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. That photograph you sent. Is that really you? Yes. From 2 years ago, before the factory, before the hunger, before everything that had hollowed her out from the inside. I know I look different now. You look tired, hungry, scared. His voice softened slightly. But your eyes are the same. I remember thinking when I saw that photograph that you had old eyes. eyes that had seen too much. The stew arrived, interrupting them. 2 thick bowls of beef and vegetables with chunks of potato swimming in dark gravy. A basket of biscuits still steaming. The coffee came in heavy mugs, strong enough that the smell alone made Celeste's head clear slightly. She stared at the food, her stomach cramped with wanting it. "Go on," Wyatt said. "It won't bite back." She picked up the spoon. Her hand shook so badly that some of the stew slopped over the edge of the bowl. Mortified, she set the spoon down. "Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm making a mess." Wyatt reached across the table and steadied her hand with his own. His palm was calloused, warm, rough from work. "Stop apologizing. You've been through something that would break most people. You're allowed to shake." His hand stayed there until hers steadied. Then he let go and picked up his own spoon. They ate in silence. Celeste tried to pace herself, tried to be ladylike, but her body had other ideas. The food was simple, basic frontier cooking, but after days of nothing, it tasted like the finest meal she'd ever had. She finished the first bowl before she realized it, looked up to find Wyatt watching her. "More?" he asked. "I couldn't—" He was already signaling the server. "Another bowl for the lady." When it came, she ate more slowly. The desperate edge of hunger had been blunted. She could think again, which meant she could worry again. "You could still send me back," she said quietly. "The stagecoach heads back east day after tomorrow. I'd understand." "Is that what you want?" "No." The word came out fierce, surprising her. "No. St. Louis. There's nothing for me there. I was working 16-hour shifts at the textile mill, living in a boarding house with 8 other girls in a room meant for 3, eating 1 meal a day if I was lucky. She stopped, swallowed. "Your letters were the only good thing in my life. The only thing that made me think there might be something better out there. And now you've seen me, seen this town. Still think there's something better?" She looked at him, really looked. At this man who'd fed her when she was hungry, covered her when she was exposed, defended her when she was defenseless. "Yes," she said. Something in his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. "Good, because I wasn't planning on sending you back anyway. Even though I arrived looking like—" "You arrived." He cut her off gently. "That's what matters. You had the courage to come west to marry a stranger. Had the strength to survive bandits and 3 days of hard travel. That tells me more about who you are than any fancy dress could." Celeste felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "Your letters. They said you had a ranch. 20 miles from town?" "That's right, the Triple M. 3,000 acres, about 200 head of cattle right now. House isn't much, 2 bedrooms, kitchen, front room. Built it myself 6 years ago." He paused. "It's isolated. Lonely, the work's hard, winters are brutal, water's scarce in summer. The nearest neighbor's 10 miles off." "Are you trying to scare me away?" "I'm trying to be honest, so you know what you're getting into." Celeste wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. The warmth bled into her palms. "In your 4th letter, you wrote that you'd built the house thinking you'd always live alone, that you'd made peace with loneliness." He nodded slowly. "I did write that. And then you wrote that you were tired of making peace with things that made you unhappy." She met his eyes. "I understood that, because I was doing the same thing, making peace with hunger, with exhaustion, with the idea that my life would never be more than surviving until the next day. And now I'm sitting in a hotel in Arizona with a man who kept his promises, who treated me with kindness when he had every reason not to." Her voice dropped. "I don't know what kind of wife I'll be, Mr. Mercer. I don't know if I'll be good at ranch life, but I promise I'll work hard. I won't complain. I'll earn my keep." "That's not what I'm looking for." The words hit her like cold water. "What?" "I don't need someone to earn their keep." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I need a partner. Someone who'll work beside me, not for me. Someone who'll tell me when I'm being a stubborn ass. Someone who'll make that empty house feel like a home." He paused. "And I need someone who'll let me take care of them when they need it, like right now." "I don't need—" "You do, and that's fine. We all need help sometimes." He finished his coffee. "Here's what's going to happen. I've got a room reserved at this hotel, booked it a week ago when I knew you'd be arriving. You're going to go upstairs, take a bath, sleep in a real bed. Tomorrow we'll see about getting you some proper clothes. Day after tomorrow, If you still want to go through with this, we'll ride out to the ranch. What about, she hesitated, what about the wedding? What about it? Your letter said you wanted to marry quickly, that it was important for propriety's sake. It is, but you just survived something that would destroy most people. You need time to recover. Time to decide if this is really what you want. His voice was firm. I'm not going to rush you into anything when you're exhausted and scared and not thinking clearly. But people will talk about me staying in town, unchaperoned. People are already talking. He said it matter-of-factly. Let them. I don't give a damn what Mrs. Bartlett and her prayer circle think. You're here on my word. That'll have to be good enough. Celeste stared at him. Every man she'd ever known, her father before he died, the factory foreman, the men who'd come sniffing around the boarding house, they'd all taken. Taken her time, her labor, her dignity. This man was offering safety, offering time, offering choice. It was so foreign she almost didn't trust it. Why? The question came out raw. Why are you being so kind to me? Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. 6 months ago, I put an advertisement in the St. Louis paper because I was tired of being alone. Tired of talking to cattle and horses and empty rooms. I got 43 responses. He paused. 42 of them were from women who saw a rancher with land and cattle and dollar signs. They wrote about what I could provide for them, what kind of life I could give them. And my letter? Your letter asked if I'd ever been so lonely it felt like drowning. He met her eyes. I knew right then you understood, so I wrote back. And you wrote again. And in 6 months of letters, you never once asked how much money I had or how big my house was. You asked about the stars out here, about what the desert smelled like after rain, about whether I thought loneliness was something you could die from or just something that made you wish you could. Celeste's throat tightened. So when I saw you step off that stagecoach looking like you'd been through hell itself, you want to know what I thought? He leaned back. I thought, there's the woman who asked me about the stars. Everything else, the clothes, the dirt, the circumstances, that's just noise. The woman who wrote those letters is still in there. That's who I'm being kind to. She couldn't speak, didn't trust her voice. Finish your coffee, Wyatt said gently. Then I'll walk you up to your room. You need rest. I need... She stopped. What did she need? I need to know this is real, that I didn't dream it, that tomorrow I won't wake up back in St. Louis in that boarding house with the leaking roof and the rats in the walls. It's real. He stood, came around to her side of the table, offered his hand. And tomorrow, you'll wake up in Redemption, Arizona. Day after that, if you choose it, you'll go home to the Triple M. And every day after that, for as long as you want, you'll have a place, a home, someone who will make sure you never go hungry again. She took his hand. Let him help her stand. They walked through the hotel lobby, more stairs, more whispers, and up the stairs to the second floor. Room 7. He unlocked the door, handed her the key. Baths down the hall. Water should still be hot this time of day. Take your time. He paused in the doorway. I'll be staying at the boarding house across the street. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you send word, understand? Yes. One more thing. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is the number for the general store. Tomorrow morning, go down there. Tell Miller you need clothes, undergarments, shoes, a coat, whatever you need. Tell him to put it on my account. Don't argue, don't refuse, just get what you need. Mr. Mercer? Wyatt. Just Wyatt. Wyatt. His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. I can't let you spend... You can and you will. We're going to be married. What's mine will be yours. Might as well start now. He tipped his hat. Get some rest, Celeste. You've earned it. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Celeste stood in the middle of the hotel room, the nicest room she'd been in for years, and let herself shake. Let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The terror of the bandit attack, the humiliation of arriving filthy and destitute, the shock of being treated like she mattered. Then she walked down the hall to the bathroom. The bath was everything she'd dreamed of during those 3 miserable days on the stagecoach. Hot water, real soap that smelled like lavender, clean towels. She scrubbed until her skin was pink, washed her hair 3 times, tried to scrub away not just the dirt, but the fear, the shame, the terrible certainty that she was unworthy of kindness. When she finally returned to her room, she found a nightgown laid out on the bed that hadn't been there before. Simple white cotton, clean and soft. A note beside it in rough handwriting. From the general store. Sleep well. W. She put it on, climbed into bed. The sheets smelled like sun and soap. The pillow was soft. Through the window she could see the stars. The same stars she'd asked Wyatt about in her first letter. They looked bigger out here. Brighter. She fell asleep thinking about a man with kind eyes and calloused hands who'd seen past her torn dress to the woman underneath. A man who'd kept his promises when keeping them would have been so much harder than breaking them. Tis. Morning came with brutal sunshine and the sound of the town waking up outside her window. Celeste woke confused for a moment, the bed too soft, the room too quiet. Then memory flooded back and she sat up fast, half convinced yesterday had been a dream. But no. The nightgown was real. The clean room was real. And when she looked out the window, she could see the rough frontier town of Redemption spreading out in the early light. She dressed in the same torn clothes from yesterday, they were all she had, and made her way downstairs. The hotel keeper, an older man with a kind face, pointed her toward the dining room. Mr. Mercer left instructions, said you're to have breakfast before you do anything else, and that I'm to make sure you actually eat it, not just pick at it. Despite everything, Celeste felt herself smile slightly. He said that? Yes, ma'am. Said you have a tendency to downplay your own needs. The hotel keeper grinned. Said I'm to tell you that's nonsense and you're to eat a full meal. She ate eggs and bacon and toast with butter and jam, drank more of that strong frontier coffee. Each bite felt like defiance against every day she'd gone hungry in St. Louis, against every factory foreman who'd told her she should be grateful for starvation wages, against every person who'd made her feel like she didn't deserve to take up space in the world. After breakfast, she walked to the general store. Miller, a thin man with nervous hands, brightened when she entered. Miss Whitaker, Mr. Mercer said you'd be coming by. Said I'm to help you find everything you need, and he was very specific that I'm not to let you refuse anything on account of cost. I don't want to take advantage. Ma'am, Wyatt Mercer is one of the most respected men in this territory. His word is good as gold and then some. If he says you're to have what you need, then that's what's happening. Miller pulled out a measuring tape. Now, let's start with the basics. 3 hours later, Celeste stood in the hotel room surrounded by packages. 3 day dresses, simple calico, but clean and whole, undergarments, a riding skirt, a warm coat for winter, 2 pairs of boots, a hat, stockings, a hairbrush, soap, all of it more than she'd owned in years. She was folding the dresses carefully into the small trunk Miller had insisted she needed when someone knocked on her door. It's me, Wyatt's voice called. Can I come in? She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, hat in hand, looking uncertain in a way he hadn't yesterday, like he'd used up all his confidence defending her to the town and now wasn't sure what to do with himself. I wanted to check on you, he said. Make sure you got what you needed from the store. More than I needed, Mr. Mercer, Wyatt, it's too much. It's not nearly enough. He glanced past her into the room, saw the packages. Good. You actually listened. Then hesitantly. Can we talk? There are things we should discuss before you make any final decisions. She stepped back, let him in. He closed the door but stayed near it, maintaining a respectful distance. I've been thinking, he started, about what happens next, and I realize I've been making assumptions about what you want, what you expect. What kind of assumptions? That you want to go through with this, with marrying me, moving to the ranch. He met her eyes. Yesterday, you were exhausted and scared and not in any position to make life decisions. Today, you've had food and rest. So I'm asking clearly, do you still want this? Celeste sat on the edge of the bed. Yes. Even knowing it won't be easy, that the ranch is isolated and the work is hard and there won't be fancy dresses or social calls or any of the things a woman might want, I never wanted those things. Then what do you want? The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. What she wanted. Not what she could provide, not what she could endure, but what she actually wanted for herself. I want to matter, she said finally. I want to wake up in the morning and know that my presence in the world makes some kind of difference. I want to work hard at something that means something. I want... She stopped, feeling foolish. What? I want someone to notice if I don't come home at night. Wyatt's expression softened. In St. Louis, if you hadn't come home one night, would anyone have noticed? The factory would have noticed I missed my shift. They'd have docked my pay. She smiled bitterly. But noticed me? Cared that I was gone? No. Then hear me now. He crossed the room, knelt down so they were eye level. If you marry me, if you come to the Triple M, and if you don't come home one night, I will tear this territory apart looking for you. I will notice. I will care. You will matter. Her eyes burned. You barely know me. I know you well enough. 6 months of letters. That photograph where you looked at the camera like you were daring it to see past your smile to the loneliness underneath. And yesterday, when you could have broken down, could have given up, you held your head up and walked through that crowd with me. He paused. That's enough. What if I'm not a good wife? What if I can't? Stop. We're not doing this. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you list all the ways you think you'll fail before you've even started. His voice was firm, but not harsh. Here's what I know. You're smart, you're brave, you're honest, and you don't give up. Everything else we can figure out as we go. You have a lot of faith in someone you just met. And you got on a stagecoach and traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man you'd never met. Seems like we both have a talent for faith. He stood, offered his hand. So what do you say? Will you marry me, Celeste Whitaker? She looked at his outstretched hand, at this man who'd promised her she'd never be hungry again and who'd already started keeping that promise, at the possibility of a life that was more than just surviving until tomorrow. She took his hand. Yes. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. Good. Then we've got things to do. Pastor Williams can marry us tomorrow afternoon if you're willing. Then day after that, we head to the ranch. He paused. Unless you need more time. No, I don't need more time. I just need... She looked down at herself, at the new dress Miller had provided, but that was still simple calico. I'm going to be married in a dress from the general store. And you'll be the most beautiful woman in redemption. He said it simply, like it was a fact. But if you want something different, we can figure that out. She thought about the woman she'd been in St. Louis, the woman who'd owned 2 dresses and worked herself to exhaustion for pennies, the woman who'd dreamed of something better but never really believed she deserved it. No, she said slowly. The dress is fine. I don't need something fancy. I just need it to be real. It'll be real. He squeezed her hand once, then let go. I'll make the arrangements with Pastor Williams. You just rest, eat, get your strength back. He moved toward the door, then paused. Celeste? Yes? Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to come here. For giving me a chance to be something other than lonely. He tipped his hat. See you tomorrow. After he left, Celeste sat in the quiet hotel room and let herself believe just for a moment that maybe this could work. That maybe she'd found something real in this harsh frontier town with this quiet, kind man who'd treated her with dignity when everyone else saw only failure. The rest of the day passed in a strange blur. She ate lunch in her room. The hotel keeper brought it up without being asked, saying Wyatt had left instructions. She sat by the window and watched redemption go about its business. Saw the townspeople going in and out of shops. Saw children playing in the dusty street. Saw the brutal sun beating down on everything. Tomorrow she'd marry a man she'd known for less than 2 days. Then she'd ride out into the wilderness to a ranch 20 miles from town. To a life she couldn't quite imagine, with a man who'd promised her safety and respect and a home. It was terrifying. It was the best chance she'd ever had. That night, lying in the hotel bed, Celeste made herself a promise. She would work hard. She would learn. She would become a woman worthy of Wyatt Mercer's faith in her. She would prove that his decision to honor his commitment hadn't been a mistake. She fell asleep with the stars visible through her window, bright and endless in the desert sky. Cheats. The wedding happened at 2 o'clock the next afternoon in the small church at the end of Redemption's main street. Celeste wore one of her new calico dresses, the blue one, with her hair brushed until it shone and pinned up in a simple style. She had no flowers, no veil, no music, just her and Wyatt and Pastor Williams, and 2 witnesses pulled in from the street. Mrs. Bartlett, of course, made sure to attend. Sat in the front pew with her sour face and disapproving eyes. A handful of others trickled in, probably more out of curiosity than support. Celeste stood at the front of the church, hands shaking, and watched Wyatt walk down the aisle to stand beside her. He'd cleaned up, washed, shaved, put on what was probably his only good shirt. He looked solid, real. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. Dearly beloved. The ceremony was short, frontier practical. The promises they made to each other were the same ones spoken at 1,000 other weddings in 1,000 other places. To love, honor, cherish, for better or worse, in sickness and health. When it came time for the vows, Wyatt's voice was steady. I, Wyatt Mercer, take you, Celeste Whitaker, to be my lawfully wedded wife. Celeste's voice shook. I, Celeste Whitaker, take you, Wyatt Mercer, to be my lawfully wedded husband. You may kiss the bride. Wyatt leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. She didn't. His lips brushed hers, gentle and brief. When he pulled back, he was smiling slightly. Hello, Mrs. Mercer. Mrs. Mercer. She was married. To this man. In this town. In this life that was nothing like what she'd imagined for herself growing up in St. Louis. They walked back down the aisle together. Outside the church, a few people had gathered. Some called out congratulations. Others just stared. Mrs. Bartlett sniffed loudly and said something to her companion about the degradation of proper society. Wyatt ignored them all. He helped Celeste into the wagon he'd brought, loaded with supplies from the general store, and climbed up beside her. Ready? He asked. Was she? Ready to leave this town, to ride into the wilderness with a man she'd married 30 minutes ago? Ready to start a life she couldn't quite picture? Yes, she said, because what else could she say? Because turning back wasn't an option. Because for better or worse, this was her choice now. Wyatt clicked to the horses and they started moving. Down Redemption's main street, past the general store and the hotel and the saloon and all the places Celeste had barely begun to know. Past the last buildings and out into the open desert. The sun was brutal. The landscape was harsh, all rock and scrub brush and endless sky. So different from St. Louis with its buildings and crowds and constant noise. Out here, the silence was huge, pressing down from the sky. It's about a 3-hour ride, Wyatt said. We'll be there before dark. Celeste nodded, not trusting her voice. They rode in silence for a while. The wagon creaked, the horses' hooves kicked up dust. The sun beat down relentlessly. Finally, Wyatt spoke. You're scared. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. Of me? Of everything. She looked at him. Of disappointing you. Of failing. Of... She stopped. Of what? Of waking up one day and finding out that this kindness wasn't real. That it was just temporary. That I'll end up hungry and alone again. He was quiet for a long moment, then... My father died when I was 16, kicked by a horse. My mother followed him 2 years later, just gave up, I think. Couldn't face life without him. His voice was matter of fact, but there was pain underneath. I spent the next 18 years building the Triple M by myself. Every fence post, every barn board, every acre cleared. I did it alone because I figured that was my lot, to be alone. What changed? I woke up one morning and realized I was 42 years old. I'd built something worth having, but there was nobody to share it with. Nobody to talk to except cattle and horses. Nobody to notice if I lived or died except the creditors who'd care about getting paid. He looked at her. I was surviving, but I wasn't living, and I got tired of it. So you placed an advertisement. So I placed an advertisement, looking for someone who understood what it meant to be alone. Who'd built walls around themselves to survive and maybe wanted a chance to tear some of those walls down. He paused. When your letter came, that first one where you asked if I thought loneliness was something you could die from, I knew I'd found someone who understood. I'm still scared. Good. Means you're paying attention. He smiled slightly. I'm scared too, if we're being honest. Scared of being a bad husband. Scared of letting you down. Scared of... He stopped. Of what? Of getting used to not being alone and then having it taken away. His voice dropped. My parents, they loved each other more than anything. When my father died, it destroyed my mother. I watched her waste away because she couldn't imagine life without him. That kind of love is terrifying. Celeste understood then. They were both walking into this afraid, both risking everything on the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something that would last. "What do we do?" she asked. "We take it one day at a time. We're honest with each other. We work together." He looked at her. "And we remember that we both chose this. We both got on this wagon willingly. That counts for something." She nodded slowly. The landscape gradually changed as they rode. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills. Rocky outcroppings appeared. The scrub brush got thicker. And then, as they crested a hill, Wyatt pulled the horses to a stop. "There," he said, pointing. In the valley below, Celeste could see it. The Triple M Ranch. The house was small, single-story, rough-hewn wood that had weathered to gray. A barn and some outbuildings nearby, corrals with cattle visible as dots in the distance, a windmill turning slowly. It wasn't much, wasn't grand or impressive, but it was real, solid, built to last. "It's not fancy," Wyatt said, "but it's home." Celeste stared down at her new life spread out below her in that harsh, beautiful valley, at the house that would be hers, at the land that went on forever, at the man beside her who'd promised her safety and respect and a place to belong. "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. They reached the ranch house just as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, turning the sky orange and purple in ways Celeste had never seen back east. Wyatt helped her down from the wagon with careful hands, like she might break if he gripped too hard. "Watch the step," he said, nodding toward the porch. "Third board's loose. Keep meaning to fix it." The inside of the house was dim after the bright desert sun. Celeste's eyes adjusted slowly, taking in the space that was now supposed to be hers. The front room held a stone fireplace, 2 chairs that had seen better days, a table with mismatched chairs. Everything was clean but worn, functional. A man's space. "Kitchen's through there," Wyatt said, pointing. "Bedroom's on the left, spare room on the right. I moved my things to the spare room last week. Figured you'd want your own space until you didn't." The consideration in that simple act made Celeste's throat tight. "You didn't have to." "I did." He set her trunk down carefully. "Marriage certificate doesn't mean you owe me anything. We move at whatever pace makes sense." She looked around the room again, trying to imagine herself here, cooking at that stove, sitting in one of those chairs, making this place something other than a lonely man's shelter. "It's quiet," she said finally. "Gets quieter. Wait until full dark. City folks usually find it unnerving at first." He moved toward the kitchen. "You hungry? I can make something simple. I can cook." "Didn't say you couldn't, but you've had a long day. Getting married, 3-hour wagon ride. Seems reasonable to let someone else handle dinner." Celeste followed him into the kitchen. It was small, orderly. Cast iron pots hung from hooks. A wood-burning stove dominated one wall. Shelves held basic supplies: flour, beans, coffee, salt. "What do you usually eat?" she asked. "Beans, bacon, biscuits when I'm feeling ambitious." He pulled out a pan. "Sometimes I shoot a rabbit or we butcher a steer, not much variety. I can do better than that." He glanced at her, something almost like amusement in his eyes. "Not tonight you can't. Tonight you sit. Tomorrow you can prove you're a better cook than me. Won't be hard. I burn water." She wanted to argue, to prove herself useful immediately, but exhaustion was creeping in around the edges. The weight of everything that had happened in the past 3 days was catching up. So she sat at the small kitchen table and watched her new husband cook. He moved efficiently, no wasted motion, sliced bacon, got it sizzling, mixed up biscuit dough with practiced hands, put coffee on to boil. "You're better at this than you claimed," Celeste observed. "I don't starve. That's different than being good." He flipped the bacon. "My mother tried to teach me proper cooking, gave up after I ruined 3 pots of stew in a row." "What happened to them?" "Forgot about them. Got caught up working on a fence, came back to find them burned black." He smiled slightly at the memory. She said any man who could forget about food that thoroughly deserved to eat burned beans for the rest of his life. Was she right? Mostly. He plated the bacon, added biscuits, though I learned to set a timer after that. They ate in comfortable silence. The food was simple but good, better than anything Celeste had made for herself in the St. Louis boarding house. Through the window, she watched the light fade from the sky. The darkness came fast out here. Absolute. No streetlights. No buildings blocking the stars. "Do you have family back in St. Louis?" Wyatt asked. "No. My mother died 3 years ago. Fever. My father died when I was 12. Factory accident." She pushed bacon around her plate. "No siblings, no aunts or uncles that claimed me. I was on my own by 15. That's young. Old enough to work, that's all that mattered." She met his eyes. "What about you? You mentioned your parents, but no one. I had a sister, but she married a banker from San Francisco. Haven't heard from her in 8 years. Think she's embarrassed by her rancher brother." He said it without bitterness, just fact. "So it's just me." Was just me. The past tense hung in the air between them. After dinner, Wyatt showed her the bedroom. It was sparse. Bed with an iron frame, dresser, washstand, one window looking out toward the barn. Her trunk sat at the foot of the bed. "Linens are clean. Changed them yesterday." He lingered in the doorway. "There's water in the pitcher. If you need more, pumps out back." "Wyatt." He turned. "Thank you for everything. For not—" She struggled to find words. "For treating me like a person instead of a problem." Something in his face softened. "You're my wife, Celeste. That means something to me. Meant something before I even met you, just from your letters." He paused. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll start figuring out how this works." He closed the door, leaving her alone in the room that was supposed to be hers now. Celeste stood in the silence, listening to his footsteps move toward the spare room. A door closed, then nothing but the wind outside and the settling sounds of the house. She unpacked her trunk slowly, putting her few belongings in the dresser. The new dresses, the undergarments, the hairbrush. Everything Miller had helped her pick out. It all fit in 2 drawers with room to spare. When she finally lay down in the bed, the mattress was firmer than the hotel's, but comfortable. Through the window, she could see stars so thick they looked like someone had spilled salt across black cloth. The silence was enormous, pressing. So different from St. Louis, where there was always noise, wagons, voices, the factory whistle at dawn. Out here, there was nothing, just wind and darkness and the occasional sound of cattle lowing in the distance. It should have been terrifying. Instead, for the first time in years, Celeste felt safe enough to sleep deeply. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving around the kitchen. Gray pre-dawn light filtered through the window. For a moment she lay still, orienting herself. Then memory returned. The ranch, the marriage, her new life. She dressed quickly in one of her calico dresses and ventured out. Wyatt stood at the stove, poking at something in a pan. He'd already been outside. His boots were dusty, and his shirt had that smell of barn and hay. He glanced up when she entered. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I'm used to early mornings." She moved toward the coffee pot. "Factory started at 5. If you weren't at your station by then, they docked your pay." "Well, cattle don't care about the clock, but they do need feeding." He gestured at the pan. "I'm making a mess of eggs. You want to take over before I ruin them?" She took the spatula from him and surveyed the damage. The eggs were scrambled but uneven, some parts overcooked while others were still runny. She adjusted the heat, stirred, added a pinch of salt from the nearby container. "See, you're already doing better," Wyatt said. He poured 2 cups of coffee. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in years." "Good. You needed it." He leaned against the counter, watching her work. "So here's what I'm thinking for today. I need to ride out and check on the cattle in the south pasture. You can come with me if you want, get a sense of the land. Or you can stay here, settle in, explore the house." "I'll come with you." He raised an eyebrow. "You ride?" "I did when I was young. My father kept a horse for getting to the factory. He taught me before he died. Long time ago, though." "I remember." She plated the eggs, divided them evenly. "And I need to learn the ranch if I'm going to be useful here." "You don't have to be useful on day 1. "Yes, I do." She met his eyes. "I need to earn my place." "Celeste, please, let me do this." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but we take it slow, and if you get tired or sore, you tell me. Deal?" "Deal." They ate quickly. Wyatt showed her how to work the pump out back, how to bank the fire in the stove so it would stay lit while they were gone. Small practical things that would matter out here where the nearest neighbor was 10 miles away. The barn was bigger than it looked from the house. 2 horses in stalls, a milk cow, chickens scratching in the dirt outside. Wyatt saddled both horses with efficient movements. "This is Copper," he said, leading out a reddish-brown mare. "She's steady, won't spook easy. Just keep a firm hand on the reins and she'll treat you right." Celeste approached slowly, let the horse smell her before stroking its neck. The animal was warm, solid, real. She found the stirrup, pulled herself up. Her body remembered the motion even if her muscles protested slightly. Wyatt mounted his own horse, a big gray gelding, and nodded approvingly. "You weren't lying. You do remember. Told you I wasn't useless?" "Never said you were. But there's a difference between knowing how to do something and having done it recently." He clicked to his horse. "Come on, we'll take it easy." They rode out as the sun broke over the horizon, turning the desert landscape gold and amber. Celeste had thought the land looked harsh from the wagon yesterday, but from horseback it was different. She could see the details now, the way the scrub brush created patterns, how the rock formations caught the light, the distant mountains purple against the sky. "How much land is yours?" she asked. 3,000 acres, give or take. Runs from that ridge there." He pointed north. "Down to the creek bed you can't see from here. East to the property markers by Dead Man's Canyon, west to where the land turns too rocky for grazing." It was more space than Celeste could properly imagine. In St. Louis, 3,000 square feet would have been enormous. 3,000 acres was incomprehensible. "And you work all of this alone?" "Mostly. I hire help during roundup and branding. Got a man who comes by sometimes to help with the heavy work." He adjusted his hat against the climbing sun. "But day to day, yeah, it's just me. Now it's us." He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Yeah, now it's us." They rode for an hour before reaching the south pasture. Cattle dotted the landscape, big rangy animals with long horns. They lifted their heads as Wyatt and Celeste approached, but didn't scatter. "About 100 head in this section," Wyatt said. "I'm looking for a cow that was limping yesterday. Want to make sure she's not getting worse." He rode among the cattle with easy confidence, checking them with practiced eyes. Celeste stayed back, watching. This was his world. His work. She knew nothing about it yet. After 20 minutes, Wyatt returned. "Found her. Looks like she's moving better. Probably just stepped wrong." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "Thirsty? There's a spring about a mile from here." The spring turned out to be a small pool of water surrounded by cottonwood trees, the only green things Celeste had seen since arriving. Wyatt dismounted, helped her down. "Horses need water anyway," he said, leading them to the pool's edge. Celeste knelt by the water, splashed some on her face. It was cold, sweet. "This is beautiful. Only reliable water source on this part of the property. That's why the cattle stay nearby." He sat on a flat rock, stretched out his legs. "Gets crowded here in summer when the creek beds dry up." She sat beside him, aware suddenly of how alone they were. Miles from the house, miles from town, just them and the horses and the endless sky. "Are you always this quiet when you work?" she asked. "Usually. Not much point talking to cattle." He glanced at her. "Why? Does it bother you?" "No, I'm just trying to figure out how this works. How we work. That makes 2 of us." He picked up a small stone, tossed it into the pool. "I spent 18 years getting used to being alone. Having someone else here, it's an adjustment." Good adjustment or bad adjustment? Too soon to tell. But he said it with a slight smile that took the edge off. "Ask me again in a month." "What if in a month you decide you prefer being alone? What if in a month you decide you hate ranch life and want to go back to the city?" They looked at each other, both of them thinking the same thing, that they'd made huge, irreversible decisions based on letters and hope and desperation. "I won't go back," Celeste said firmly. "Whatever happens, I won't go back to St. Louis, to that life. Even if this doesn't work, even then, I'd rather fail at something new than succeed at being miserable." She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. "What about you? Would you send me away if this doesn't work?" "No." The answer came quick, certain. "I made a promise to provide for you, protect you, give you a home. That doesn't go away just because things get difficult. But if I make you unhappy, then we figure it out. We talk. We adjust. He met her eyes. But I don't give up on people, Celeste. Once you're mine, once I make a commitment, I see it through. The word mine sent something warm through her chest. Possessive, but not in a way that felt threatening. More like belonging, like having a place. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the horses drink and the wind move through the cottonwood leaves. Tell me about the factory, Wyatt said eventually. In St. Louis. What was it like? Loud, hot in summer, freezing in winter. We made textiles, cotton fabric for clothes and linens. She picked at a thread on her dress. 16 hours a day standing at a loom. Your hands would cramp, your feet would swell, but if you stopped, the foreman would dock your pay. How much did they pay you? $3 a week. Out of that I paid for my bed in the boarding house, food when I could afford it, anything else I needed. She laughed bitterly. I was saving for a better room, one where I wouldn't have to share with 7 other girls. At the rate I was saving, I would have been 50 before I could afford it. That's why you answered my advertisement. That's why I answered 40 advertisements. Yours was the only one that wrote back. She glanced at him. The only one that seemed to see me as a person instead of a solution to a problem. What made you think that? Your second letter, you wrote about the stars out here, how they looked different than anywhere else, how sometimes you'd stand outside and feel like you were the only person in the world. She smiled slightly. That's when I knew you understood what it meant to be lonely, even when you're surrounded by people. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, then, in St. Louis, did anyone... He stopped, started again. Were there men who tried? She understood what he was asking. Yes, the foreman at the factory. Some of the men who hung around the boarding house. They saw a girl alone and thought that meant available. Her voice hardened. They were wrong. What did you do? Learned to make myself invisible. Kept my head down, my eyes on my work. Became someone not worth noticing. She looked at him. It's a useful skill when you're powerless. Making yourself so small and quiet that people forget you're there. You're not powerless here. Aren't I? I don't know this land. Don't know how to ranch. I'm completely dependent on you for everything. For now, but that changes. You learn, you get stronger, you become a partner instead of a dependent. He stood, offered his hand. Come on, I want to show you something. She let him pull her up. They mounted the horses again and rode west toward the mountains. The terrain got rougher, more rocks, steeper inclines. Celeste focused on keeping her seat, on not falling behind. After 30 minutes, Wyatt stopped at the top of a ridge. Below them spread a valley she hadn't seen before, greener than the rest of the land, with a creek running through it. This is the north section, Wyatt said. Best grazing on the whole property. In spring, when the snow melts, that creek runs full. The grass grows thick. It's where I want to expand eventually. Expand? More cattle. Maybe a second barn. Start breeding horses instead of just buying them. He looked at her. Build something bigger than what I've got now. Why are you showing me this? Because if we're doing this, building a life together, I want you to know what I'm working toward, what I'm hoping for. He gestured at the valley. That's not just my dream anymore, it's ours, if you want it to be. Celeste stared at the green valley, at the possibilities stretching out below, at the future this man was offering to share with her. I want it, she said. They rode back to this house slowly, arriving in early afternoon. The sun was brutal, the heat shimmering off the rocks. Celeste was sore from riding, sunburned despite her hat, and more tired than she wanted to admit. Wyatt noticed. You're done for today. Go inside, rest. I've got work in the barn. I can help. You can rest. That's helping. He was already dismounting, leading his horse toward the barn. Tomorrow you can do more. Today you proved you can ride. That's enough. She wanted to argue, but her body was screaming for relief. So she went inside, poured water from the pitcher, and collapsed on the bed, still wearing her dusty dress. When she woke, the light had changed. Late afternoon sliding toward evening. She could hear sounds from outside, Wyatt working, moving around. She got up, splashed water on her face, and went to the kitchen. He'd left beans soaking in a pot. Some bacon sat on the counter. The stove was banked low, but still warm. Celeste looked at the simple ingredients and made a decision. She built up the fire, got water boiling, chopped the bacon fine, added it to the beans with some salt and a bit of dried herbs she found in a jar. Not fancy, but better than plain beans and bacon. While that cooked, she mixed up cornbread batter and put it in the oven. Wyatt came in just as she was plating everything. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. The table set, the food ready. The house smelling like something other than dust and loneliness. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I wanted to. Needed to do something useful after sleeping half the afternoon." He washed up at the sink, sat down at the table, tasted the beans. Something in his expression shifted. Surprise, maybe pleasure. "This is good, really good. It's just beans. It's beans that taste like someone gave a damn about making them." He took another bite. "Where'd you learn to cook?" "My mother. Before she got sick, she insisted I know how to run a household properly. Said it was the only real security a woman had, being able to make a home." Celeste pushed her own food around. "Didn't save her, though. When my father died, all those skills didn't matter. We had no money, no family. She worked herself to death trying to keep us afloat." "But you survived." "Barely." She met his eyes. "I don't want to just survive anymore, Wyatt. I want to live. I want to build something that matters." "Then that's what we'll do." He said it simply, like it was decided, like her wanting something made it possible. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. After, Wyatt insisted on washing the dishes while Celeste dried and put them away. It felt domestic, normal, like they were actually married instead of two strangers fumbling toward something neither understood yet. As darkness fell, they sat in the front room. Wyatt lit a lamp. The soft light pushed back the shadows but didn't quite banish them. "Tell me about building this place," Celeste said. "The house? The ranch? All of it." So he did. Told her about buying the land 6 years ago with money he'd saved from working other people's ranches. About living in a tent for the first year while he built the house board by board. About the mistakes he'd made. Putting the barn too close to the house so the smell carried in summer. Not digging the well deep enough the first time. Losing half his first herd to a harsh winter because he didn't know the land well enough yet. "Why here?" she asked. "Why this particular spot?" "The water. That spring I showed you today, plus the creek that runs through the North Valley. Out here, water is everything. Without it, you've got nothing." He gestured toward the darkness beyond the window. "The land looked harsh when I first saw it, unforgiving. But underneath that harshness, there was possibility. If you were willing to work hard enough, willing to learn from mistakes, willing to bet everything on the chance that you could make something from nothing." Celeste understood then. He wasn't just talking about the land. "I'm going to make mistakes," she said. "Learning all of this. Ranch life. I know, I did too, still do." He looked at her steadily. "But mistakes aren't failures unless you refuse to learn from them." They sat together as the lamp burned low, not talking much, just existing in the same space. It felt strange and comfortable at the same time, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit yet, but might, with time. Eventually Wyatt stood, stretched. "I'm going to bed. Morning comes early." He paused. "You did good today. With the riding, the cooking, all of it. I fell asleep for 3 hours in the afternoon. You survived being robbed, traveling 2,000 miles, getting married, and learning to ride again, all in less than a week. You're allowed to sleep." He headed toward the spare room, then stopped. "Celeste?" "Yeah? I'm glad you're here. Even with all the uncertainty and the awkwardness and the figuring things out. I'm glad you came." Her throat tightened. "Me too." After he left, she sat alone in the lamplight for a few more minutes. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the night sky, so many more than she'd ever seen in St. Louis. Out here, with nothing to block them, they were overwhelming. She thought about the woman she'd been a week ago. Desperate, hungry, trapped in a life that was slowly killing her. That woman felt like a stranger now, like someone she used to know but had left behind. This woman, this Celeste who rode across desert rangeland and cooked beans for her husband and sat under impossible stars, she was new, still forming, still figuring out who she was supposed to be. The days began to form a pattern. Wyatt woke before dawn, started coffee, did the early barn work. Celeste woke shortly after, made breakfast, learned the rhythms of ranch life. Some days she rode out with him to check cattle or repair fence. Other days, she stayed at the house, cleaning and organizing and slowly making the space feel less like a bachelor's shelter and more like a home. She learned which chickens were good layers and which were just freeloaders, learned how to milk the cow without getting kicked, learned that the windmill needed oil on the bearings or it would seize up. Small things, practical things. Wyatt was patient with her questions, never making her feel stupid for not knowing. He showed her how to read the weather by watching the sky, how to tell if a cow was sick just by the way it moved, how to shoot the rifle he kept by the door in case of predators. You need to know how to protect yourself, he said, teaching her to aim. I'm not always going to be right here. And out here, trouble doesn't wait for convenient timing. She proved to be a decent shot after some practice. The kick of the rifle startled her at first, but she learned to brace for it, learned to breathe steady and squeeze the trigger instead of jerking it. Good, Wyatt said, watching her hit the target 3 times in a row. You're a natural, or I'm motivated not to get eaten by whatever's out there. That too. 2 weeks after she arrived, Celeste woke in the middle of the night to strange sounds. Growling, the chickens raising hell. She grabbed the rifle without thinking and ran outside in her nightgown. Wyatt was already there in the moonlight, holding his own rifle. A coyote circled the chicken coop, looking for a way in. Get back to the house, Wyatt said quietly. Instead, Celeste raised her rifle, sighted, and fired. The coyote yelped and ran, disappearing into the darkness. Wyatt turned to stare at her. I told you to get back, and I decided the chickens are my responsibility too. She lowered the rifle, hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Did I hit it? Scared it, at least. Maybe winged it. He was still looking at her like he'd never seen her before. You ran out here without thinking. The chickens could have been a bear, could have been a mountain lion, could have been anything. But he didn't sound angry, more impressed. You've got guts, I'll give you that. Or I'm stupid. Little of both, maybe. He took the rifle from her gently. Come on, let's make sure none of the chickens got hurt. They checked the coop together in the moonlight. All the birds were accounted for, just ruffled and annoyed. Wyatt reinforced the latch on the coop door while Celeste held the lamp. This happened often, she asked. Often enough? Coyotes, foxes, sometimes bigger predators. They smell easy food. They come looking. He tested the latch. You did good tonight. Responded fast. Didn't panic. I was terrified. Being terrified and doing it anyway. That's called courage. He straightened up, took the lamp from her. Let's get back inside before we freeze. In the kitchen, he made coffee even though it was 3 a.m. They sat at the table, both too awake now to go back to bed. Tell me about your first year here, Celeste said. When you were building all this? You really want to hear that? I want to know what you went through, what it took to make this place. So he told her about the loneliness that sometimes felt like it would crush him, about the nights he questioned every decision he'd made, about the storms that tore down things he'd built, the droughts that killed cattle, the times he wasn't sure he'd make it through another winter. Why didn't you quit? She asked. Where would I go? Back to working someone else's ranch for wages? Living in a bunkhouse with 20 other men? I'd already done that for 15 years. He gestured at the house around them. This was mine, is mine. Even when it was hard, even when I was failing, it was mine. That mattered. It still matters. Yeah, but now it's not just about survival. Now it's about... He stopped, searching for words. Building something that lasts. Something that means more than just one stubborn man refusing to quit. You're not alone anymore. No. He looked at her across the table, coffee steaming between them. No, I'm not. The moment stretched out, heavy with things neither of them quite knew how to say. Then Wyatt stood, gathering the cups. Sun'll be up in a few hours. Should try to get some sleep. But neither of them moved immediately. They stood in the kitchen, aware of each other in a way they hadn't been before. Aware that they were married, that they'd made promises to each other, that eventually those promises would mean more than just working side by side. Wyatt, Celeste started. Yeah? She wanted to ask about that, about when this practical arrangement would become something more, about what he expected from her, but the words wouldn't come. Nothing, just, good night, Celeste. She went back to her room, but sleep didn't come easy. She lay in the darkness thinking about the man in the spare room, about how natural it felt to work beside him, about how his rare smiles made something warm bloom in her chest, about how she was starting to want this marriage to be more than just an arrangement. The next morning, she woke to find wildflowers on the kitchen table, desert blooms in a jar of water. No note, but she knew they were from Wyatt. He was already outside when she went looking for him. She found him by the corral, working with a young horse. "The flowers," she said. "Thank you." He didn't look at her, keeping his attention on the horse. "Saw them on my morning ride. Thought they'd brighten up the house." "They do." He was quiet for a moment, then, "You handled yourself well last night, with the coyote. I wanted you to know that." "I was just protecting our chickens." "Our chickens?" He smiled slightly at that. "Yeah, I guess they are." Something had shifted between them. Celeste felt it but couldn't name it. A closing of distance, a building of trust. They were becoming partners instead of strangers playing at marriage. Over the following weeks, the changes continued. Small things. Wyatt started waiting for her to sit before he began eating. She started mending his clothes without being asked. He taught her to read the ranch account books. She taught him that food could taste like more than just fuel. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Wyatt said, "You've been here almost a month." "Has it been that long?" "Feels longer, in a good way." He leaned back in his chair. "Like you've always been here." "Some days I forget I haven't been. Then I remember I still don't know half of what I need to know about this place." "You know more than you think, more than I did at a month." He glanced at her. "You happy here?" The question caught her off guard. "Yes, are you?" "Yeah." He said it simply, but there was weight behind it. "Happier than I've been in a long time. The house feels different now, feels lived in instead of just occupied." "Is that good or bad?" "Good. Definitely good." He was quiet for a moment. "I know we got into this for practical reasons. Both of us needed something the other could provide. But I'm starting to think—" He stopped. "Think what?" "That maybe we could have more than just practical, if we wanted it." Celeste's heart picked up pace. "What kind of more?" "The kind where this isn't just an arrangement, where we're not just partners working the same land." He looked at her directly. "The kind where we're actually married, in all the ways that means." She knew what he was asking, what he was offering, a real marriage. Not just proximity and shared labor, but intimacy, trust, maybe even love. Eventually. "I'd like that," she said quietly. "You sure? We can keep going like we have been. Separate rooms, separate lives, except for the work. I won't pressure you." "I know you won't. That's part of why I'm sure." She met his eyes. "You've been patient, kind. You've given me time to feel safe here. I do feel safe. With you." He reached across the space between their chairs, offered his hand. She took it. His palm was calloused and warm against hers. "We'll take it slow," he said. "No rush. Just together." Together. They sat like that as the sun disappeared and the stars emerged, hand in hand. Two people who'd started as strangers and were slowly becoming something more. Something neither had expected, but both were starting to need. That night, Celeste moved her things into the main bedroom. Not everything at once. She was still too nervous for that. But enough. A nightgown. Her hairbrush. The photograph of her mother she'd managed to save from the bandits by hiding it in her bodice. Wyatt helped without making it awkward. Carried her trunk, set it at the foot of the bed that was now theirs instead of his. When everything was settled, he stood in the doorway looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen him. "I can sleep on the floor," he offered, "until you're more comfortable." "No, we're married. This is what married people do." She tried to sound confident, but her voice shook slightly. He crossed the room slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When he reached her, he cupped her face gently. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for." "I know, but I want to try. I want this to be real." He kissed her then, soft at first, careful. When she didn't pull away, he deepened it slightly. His hands were steady on her waist, patient and warm. Everything about him was patient. They lay down together for the first time. Wyatt held her but didn't push for more, seeming content just to have her there. Celeste pressed her face against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, trying to quiet her racing thoughts. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I'm nervous. We've got time. Tonight we just sleep. Get used to sharing the space." His hand moved in slow circles on her back. "There's no rush for the rest." She relaxed slightly. "You're being too understanding." "Not possible." He kissed the top of her head. "You've been through enough. I'm not adding to that by demanding things you're not ready to give." They fell asleep like that. Close, but not intimate. Together, but still figuring out what that meant. For Celeste, it was the first time in her life she'd slept beside someone and felt safe instead of threatened. Morning came with Wyatt, already awake, watching her with dark eyes. When she opened her own, he smiled slightly. "Morning." "Hi." She felt suddenly shy, aware that her hair was a mess and her breath probably wasn't great. "You snore a little." "I do not. Just a little." "It's cute." He brushed hair from her face. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I expected. You?" "Best I've slept in years." He sat up, stretched. "Come on. Cattle don't care about our newly married bliss. They still need feeding." The days took on new patterns after that. They still worked side by side during the day, but the nights were different, closer. They'd lie in bed talking about everything and nothing, her childhood in St. Louis, his years building the ranch, their hopes for the future. Sometimes they'd kiss, learning each other slowly. Sometimes they'd just hold each other until sleep came. It took another week before they came together fully as husband and wife. It happened naturally one evening after they'd spent the day working in the heat. Both exhausted but satisfied with what they'd accomplished. Wyatt was gentler than Celeste expected, more patient than she'd dared hope. Afterward, she cried, not from pain or regret, but from the overwhelming realization that this was real. She was married. She had a home. She had someone who cared about her pleasure as much as his own. "Did I hurt you?" Wyatt asked, concerned. No, it was good. I'm just..." She struggled to explain. "I didn't know it could be like that. Kind instead of cruel." His jaw tightened. "Someone hurt you before?" "No, I never let anyone get that close, but I saw, at the boarding house, I heard things. Girls who came back crying after dates with men. Or worse, came back with bruises." She looked at him. "I thought that's just how it was, what men did. Not all men. And not this man." He pulled her close. "I won't ever take more than you want to give. That's a promise." She believed him. The weeks rolled into months. Summer gave way to early fall, the brutal heat softening slightly. Celeste learned the ranch's rhythms like she'd learned the factory's whistle schedule. Automatic, ingrained. She could rope a calf now, though not as well as Wyatt. Could doctor a sick cow. Could read the sky and know when a storm was coming. She also learned she was pregnant. It hit her one morning when the smell of coffee, which she usually loved, made her stomach turn violent. She barely made it outside before she was sick. Wyatt found her there, pale and shaking. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" She looked at him, doing the math in her head. 6 weeks since they'd truly become husband and wife. 6 weeks of lying together most nights. Her monthly courses were late, but she'd attributed that to the change in lifestyle, the different food. "I think..." She swallowed hard. "I think I might be pregnant." He went very still. "You sure?" "No. But the signs..." She gestured helplessly. "My mother used to get sick like this when she was carrying, before she lost the babies." "Lost them?" 3 miscarriages. I was her only one that survived. Fear crept into her voice. "What if I'm like her? What if I can't..." "Hey, stop." Wyatt knelt beside her, took her hands. "First, we don't know for sure yet. Second, even if you are, that doesn't mean you'll have the same problems. Third," his voice softened. "Third, if you are pregnant, that's not a bad thing. Is it?" "I don't know. We've only been married 3 months. We're still figuring things out. A baby? That changes everything." "Everything's already changed from the moment you stepped off that stagecoach." He helped her stand. "Come on, let's get you back inside. You need to rest. The chickens can wait. You're more important than chickens." Over the next few days, the sickness got worse. Mornings were brutal. The smell of meat cooking made her ill. She was exhausted all the time, falling asleep in the middle of the afternoon like an old woman. Wyatt adjusted without complaint. took over the cooking when the smells bothered her, let her sleep when she needed it, rode into town and came back with ginger root and crackers, things the general store clerk said might help with nausea. "You didn't have to do all this," Celeste said, watching him make her ginger tea. "Yes, I did. You're carrying my child. That matters. We still don't know for sure, I know." He set the tea in front of her. "You're pregnant, Celeste. I can see it in your face, the way you're carrying yourself, and I'm—" He stopped, searching for words. "I'm happy about it. Scared, but happy." "Scared of what?" "Same thing you are, probably. That something will go wrong. That I'll be a terrible father. That we're not ready." He sat across from her, but also excited. The idea of a child, our child, running around this place, making noise, filling up the silence. She sipped the tea, letting the warmth settle her stomach. "I'm terrified I'll be like my mother. That I'll lose this baby." "You're not your mother. You're stronger than you think." He reached across the table, took her hand. "And whatever happens, we face it together. That's what we promised." 2 weeks later, they rode into Redemption to see the doctor. Old Doc Harrison confirmed what they already knew. Celeste was about 8 weeks along, due sometime in late spring. "Everything looks good so far," the doctor said, checking her over. "You're young, healthy. No reason to think you'll have problems. But your mother's history doesn't determine yours." He was firm but kind. "Just take care of yourself. Eat well. Rest when you're tired. Let your husband help instead of trying to do everything alone." On the ride back, Celeste was quiet, processing. A baby. She was going to be a mother. In 6 months, there would be another person depending on her completely. "You all right?" Wyatt asked. "I don't know. This is real now, not just suspicion, but fact." "Is that bad?" "No, just overwhelming." She looked at him. "Are you really happy about this?" "Yeah, I am." He smiled slightly. "I know it's fast. I know we're still new at being married, but yeah, I'm happy." That night, lying in bed, Wyatt's hand rested on her stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. "What if I'm a terrible mother?" she whispered. "You won't be." "You don't know that." "I know you. I know you're brave and stubborn, and you don't give up even when things are hard. I know you'll fight for this child same way you fought to survive in St. Louis, same way you fought through getting robbed and still showed up to marry a stranger." His hand moved in small circles. "That's enough. The rest you'll learn as you go." "What about you? Think you'll be a good father?" "I hope so. I'll try to be." He was quiet for a moment. "My father, he was hard but fair. Taught me to work. Never raised his hand to me or my mother. I can do that much, at least. You'll do more than that. You're patient, kind. Those matter more than anything else." They fell asleep with his hand still on her stomach, protecting something that didn't need protection yet but would soon. The pregnancy changed things. Wyatt became fiercely protective, refusing to let her do anything he deemed too risky. No more riding fence. No more climbing into the hayloft. No more heavy lifting. "I'm pregnant, not broken," Celeste argued after he stopped her from moving a sack of flour. "I know, but why risk it?" "Because I need to be useful. I can't just sit around for 6 months doing nothing." "You're growing a human being. That's not nothing." But he relented slightly. "Fine, light work, cooking, mending, gathering eggs, but nothing that could hurt you or the baby if something went wrong." She hated being restricted but understood his reasoning, especially after she started showing the slight swell of her stomach, a constant reminder that she was responsible for more than just herself now. Winter arrived early that year. Snow in November, rare for Arizona but not unheard of. The cattle huddled together for warmth. The pipes froze. Wyatt spent long days breaking ice so the animals could drink, chopping wood to keep the house warm. Celeste worried about him. He'd come in at night exhausted, hands cracked and bleeding from the cold, and refused to complain. She'd tend to him, wrapping his hands, making hot food, drawing him a bath when the water heater cooperated. "You're going to work yourself to death," she said one particularly brutal night. "Just doing what needs doing." "What needs doing is you need to rest. You can't keep going like this." "Don't have a choice. Cattle need water or they die. House needs wood or we freeze. That's how it works out here." She understood that too. The harsh reality of ranch life. Nature didn't care about exhaustion or frozen hands or anything except survival. Christmas came and went quietly. They couldn't get to town through the snow, so it was just the two of them. Celeste made a special dinner with supplies they had on hand. Wyatt gave her a rocking chair he'd been secretly building in the barn, rough but sturdy, sized right for holding a baby. "For the nursery," he said, looking almost shy. "I know we don't have a nursery yet, but I thought—" She kissed him instead of finishing the sentence. "It's perfect. You're perfect. Far from it, but I'm trying." January brought a blizzard that lasted 3 days. They were trapped inside, snow piling up against the windows, the wind howling like something alive and angry. Wyatt kept the fire going constantly. Celeste rationed their food, making what they had stretch. On the third day, the cattle started dying. They could hear them from inside, the awful sounds of animals freezing to death. Wyatt stood at the window watching, his face carved from stone. "I have to go out there," he said finally. "You'll die if you go out in this." "They're dying right now. I can at least try to get them to shelter." "Wyatt, no!" But he was already dressing in every warm thing he owned. He kissed her hard before going out into the storm. Celeste stood at the window, terrified, watching him disappear into white nothing. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then 2. She put more wood on the fire, made coffee she didn't drink, prayed to a deity she wasn't sure she believed in that he'd come back. When he finally stumbled through the door 3 hours later, he was hypothermic, barely conscious. She got him out of his frozen clothes, wrapped him in blankets, held him by the fire until the shaking stopped. "Lost 30 head, he mumbled through chattering teeth. "Maybe more. Couldn't save them." "You saved yourself. That's what matters." "No, the cattle. They're our livelihood, our future, the baby's future." "The baby needs a father more than it needs cattle." She held him tighter. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." He recovered, but the loss hit him hard. 30 cattle represented months of work, significant money. They'd been planning to expand in the spring, but now they'd be lucky to break even. "We'll rebuild," Celeste said. "We've got time." "Maybe. If another disaster doesn't hit first." He stared at the account books, the numbers telling a harsh story. "I'm sorry. I promised you security, and here we are barely scraping by. You promised me I'd never go hungry. I'm not hungry. You promised me a home. I have one. Everything else is just details." But she could see the weight on him. The worry that he was failing as a husband, as a provider, as a soon-to-be father. The spring thaw came late. When it finally arrived, they discovered more damage, fences down, a corner of the barn roof collapsed, equipment broken by the cold. The work ahead was daunting, but Celeste was 6 months pregnant now, her belly round and obvious. She felt the baby move, strange flutters at first, then solid kicks. Wyatt would press his hand to her stomach and marvel at each movement. "Strong," he'd say. "Takes after you." Or you're the one who walked 3 hours through a blizzard. That was stupidity, not strength. No, that was caring more about your cattle than yourself, about our future. She placed her hand over his. "This baby's lucky. It's got parents who don't quit even when things are impossible." They hired help for the heavy spring work, 2 ranch hands from town who needed work. It ate into their limited funds, but Wyatt couldn't do it alone, and Celeste couldn't help in her condition. One of the hands, a young man named Jack, made comments about Celeste when he thought Wyatt couldn't hear. Nothing explicit, just observations about how she looked, how marriage seemed to agree with her. Wyatt heard anyway. He pulled Jack aside one afternoon, spoke quietly enough that Celeste couldn't make out the words. But Jack's face went pale, and he didn't make any more comments after that. "What did you say to him?" she asked later. "Told him if he looked at my pregnant wife like that again, I'd break his jaw." Wyatt said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. He understood. "I can handle a few comments. You shouldn't have to. You're my wife. My responsibility to protect." He looked at her seriously. "Any man disrespects you, disrespects me. That doesn't stand." She felt a fierce warmth at his protectiveness. This man who'd married her when she arrived in rags now defended her honor like she was precious, like she mattered. In late May, as Celeste entered her 9th month, everything changed again. She was in the kitchen making bread when the first pain hit, sharp, low in her back. She froze, hands in the dough, waiting to see if it would come again. It did. 10 minutes later, then 8 minutes after that. Wyatt, she called. He came running from outside, took one look at her face, and understood. The baby? I think so. The pains, they're regular. All right. Okay. We planned for this. But his voice was tight with barely controlled panic. I'll get the wagon ready. We'll go to town, get Doc Harrison. There's no time. Look at me. Another pain hit, and she gripped the table. These are close. Too close. This baby's coming fast. But you need the doctor. I need you. She met his eyes. You delivered calves. You can do this. That's different. That's cattle. Not my wife. Not my child. It's the same basic principle, and we don't have a choice. Another contraction, stronger. Get water boiling, gather clean towels, and for the love of everything, stay calm. He moved on autopilot, doing what she asked. Got the water going, brought towels, helped her to the bedroom. His hands shook, but his voice stayed steady. Tell me what to do. Just be here. Don't leave me. Never. The labor lasted 6 hours, the longest 6 hours of both their lives. Celeste screamed through contractions, gripped Wyatt's hands until his knuckles went white. He stayed beside her, wiping sweat from her face, telling her she was strong, she could do this. Almost there. When the baby finally came, a girl, tiny and perfect, and screaming her lungs out, Wyatt caught her with shaking hands. He cut the cord with a knife he'd sterilized in boiling water, wrapped the baby in clean towels, and placed her in Celeste's arms. You did it, he said, voice rough with emotion. You did it. Celeste looked down at the tiny face, the small hands already trying to grasp at air. Her daughter. She'd made a person. She and Wyatt together had created this small, perfect thing. She's beautiful, Celeste whispered. She looks like you. Wyatt touched the baby's head gently, reverently. Got your nose, your chin. The baby had dark hair, lots of it, dark eyes like her father. She was small but healthy, her cries strong and indignant at being forced into the cold world. What do we call her? Wyatt asked. Celeste had been thinking about this for months. Sarah, after my mother. Sarah Mercer. He tested the name. Yeah, that's good, that's right. They stayed like that for a long time, Celeste holding Sarah, Wyatt holding both of them. A family. Against all odds, against every hardship, they'd built something real. Later, after Celeste had been cleaned up and Sarah had nursed for the first time, Wyatt sat in the rocking chair he'd made with his daughter in his arms. He looked terrified and awed in equal measure. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Celeste watched from the bed, exhausted but unable to look away. You're already doing fine. Look at her. She's calm with you. She's probably just tired from all that screaming. Or she knows her father, knows she's safe. Sarah made a small sound, her tiny hand wrapping around Wyatt's finger. He stared at that small grip like it was the most miraculous thing he'd ever seen. I promise, he said quietly, speaking to his daughter. I promise I'll take care of you, protect you, give you everything I can. You'll never wonder if you're loved. You'll never feel alone. I promise. Celeste's eyes burned. This man who'd been so lonely, he'd sent away for a mail-order bride, was now making promises to a daughter who couldn't understand him yet. But she would. One day she'd know that her father had meant every word. The weeks after Sarah's birth were exhausting. Celeste was sore, healing, learning how to be a mother. The baby needed constant care, feeding every 2 hours, diaper changes, soothing when she cried for no apparent reason. Celeste had never been so tired in her life. Wyatt helped however he could, changed diapers without complaint, walked Sarah around the house at 2 a.m. when she wouldn't sleep, took over all the household chores so Celeste could rest when the baby rested. You don't have to do all this, Celeste said one night, watching him wash dishes while she nursed Sarah. Yes, I do. You grew her. You brought her into the world. The least I can do is clean some dishes. Most men wouldn't. Most men are idiots. He dried his hands, came to sit beside her. You're doing the hard work. I'm just supporting. But it wasn't just support. It was partnership. They moved through the new reality of parenthood together, both fumbling but both trying. Some days were good. Some days Sarah cried for hours and they had no idea why. Some days Celeste cried along with her, overwhelmed and exhausted. Wyatt never complained. Never suggested this was too hard or that he regretted becoming a father. He just kept showing up, kept helping, kept being exactly what Celeste and Sarah needed. When Sarah was 6 weeks old, they finally made it to town. Doc Harrison checked her over, declared her healthy and thriving. "You two did good," he said. "Delivering at home's risky, but sometimes there's no choice. You handled it well." Mrs. Bartlett happened to be at the general store when they stopped in for supplies. She looked at Sarah with her usual sour expression. Baby came rather quickly after the wedding, didn't she?" Wyatt's jaw tightened, but Celeste spoke before he could. 9 months. Count them yourself if you can manage basic arithmetic. Mrs. Bartlett's face flushed. "I'm just saying." "You're not saying anything worth hearing. My daughter was born in wedlock to parents who love each other. That's more than some can claim." Celeste adjusted Sarah in her arms. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual important things to do." They left Mrs. Bartlett sputtering. Outside, Wyatt looked at Celeste with newfound appreciation. "You've changed." "Have I?" The woman who stepped off that stagecoach 9 months ago wouldn't have spoken to Mrs. Bartlett like that. The woman who stepped off that stagecoach 9 months ago didn't have anything worth defending. Now I do. She looked down at Sarah, then at Wyatt. "I have a family. That's worth fighting for." He kissed her right there on Redemption's main street, not caring who saw. "Yes, it is." Summer came on strong, the heat oppressive. Sarah fussed more in the heat, but was generally a good baby, healthy, alert, growing fast. Celeste's body recovered. The ranch work continued. They hired another hand for the season, a quiet older man who needed work and didn't ask questions. Money was still tight after the winter losses, but they were managing. The cattle they'd saved were thriving. The spring calves had been born healthy. If they could make it through another year without disaster, they'd be okay. One evening, with Sarah asleep in her cradle and the heat finally breaking, Celeste and Wyatt sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Been almost a year," Wyatt said, "since you arrived." "Feels like longer, like a whole lifetime." "Good lifetime or bad?" She leaned against him. "Best of my life. Even with the hard parts, the winter, the cattle dying, the fear during labor, all of it. Still the best." "Mine too." His arm came around her shoulders. "You know what I think about sometimes?" "What?" "What if you hadn't answered my advertisement? What if you'd chosen one of the other 42 men who wrote you back?" "They didn't write back. Only you did." "But what if one of them had? What if you'd married someone else?" "I didn't. I married you. And I'm glad I did." She looked up at him. "You saved me, Wyatt, from that life in St. Louis, from hunger and loneliness and feeling like I didn't matter. You saved me too, from dying alone in this house with nothing but regrets." He kissed the top of her head. "We saved each other." Inside, Sarah started to cry. Celeste started to rise, but Wyatt waved her back. "I've got her. You rest." She watched through the window as he picked up their daughter, held her against his shoulder, swayed gently. His voice drifted out, singing something low and off-key. Sarah quieted, soothed by her father's presence. Celeste sat alone on the porch, watching the stars emerge. The same stars she'd asked about in her first letter to Wyatt. The ones that had seemed so impossibly beautiful when she'd arrived, broken and afraid. They were still beautiful. But now she had someone to share them with. Now she had a home, a husband, a daughter, a life that was more than just surviving until tomorrow. She'd arrived in rags, desperate and starving. Now she sat on her own porch, watching her husband comfort their child, safe and fed and loved. It hadn't been easy. It wouldn't get easier. But it was real. It was hers. And that made every hardship worth it. Sarah took her first steps 2 weeks before her first birthday, wobbling across the kitchen floor toward Wyatt while Celeste watched from the doorway. She made it 3 steps before falling on her bottom, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. "That's my girl," Wyatt said, scooping her up. "Stubborn, just like your mother." "I'm not stubborn. I'm determined. There's a difference." "Keep telling yourself that." But he was grinning as he said it. The years that followed Sarah's birth weren't easy, but they were full. 2 more children came. A boy they named James when Sarah was 3. Then another girl, Emma, 2 years after that. The house that had once been too quiet for one lonely man now rang with children's voices, laughter, crying, the constant chaos of a growing family. Wyatt expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The work was hard, done in stolen hours between ranch duties, but he insisted on doing it himself. Built this house with my own hands the first time. I'll expand it the same way. Celeste managed the household and helped with the ranch when she could, which was less often now with 3 children needing constant attention. Some days she felt like she was drowning in laundry and meals and wiping noses. Other days she'd look at her children playing in the dirt outside and feel a fierce joy that almost hurt. "You ever regret it?" she asked Wyatt one evening after the children were finally asleep. "All of this. The noise, the chaos, the expense." "Every single day," he said, then smiled at her expression. "I'm joking. No, never. This is what I wanted without knowing I wanted it." He pulled her close. "Though I do miss the days when we could have a conversation without someone interrupting to ask about horses or why the sky is blue or where babies come from." "Sarah asked you that?" "Yesterday. I told her to ask you." "Coward." "Absolutely." He kissed her neck. "So what did you tell her?" "That we'd discuss it when she's older. Much older." The ranch grew along with the family. They'd recovered from the winter losses and then some. Wyatt's reputation for quality cattle spread, and he started getting buyers from as far as California. The North Valley he'd shown Celeste years ago was now fully developed. Better grazing, a second barn, facilities for the expanded herd. Money was still tight. It always was with a ranch and 3 children. But they weren't desperate anymore. They had enough. Sometimes they even had a little extra. When Sarah turned 7, Wyatt hired a teacher from Redemption to come twice a week and teach the children. A young woman named Miss Patterson, who rode out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, spent 4 hours drilling the children in reading, writing, and arithmetic. "They need education," Wyatt said when Celeste questioned the expense. "I don't want them trapped by ignorance the way I was. Had to teach myself to read at 20 because my parents couldn't afford schooling." Sarah took to learning like she took to everything else, with fierce determination. James was more reluctant, preferring to be outside with the animals. Emma was still too young to sit still for long, but she liked looking at the picture books Miss Patterson brought. The children made the ranch feel alive in ways it never had before. Sarah followed Wyatt everywhere, begging to help with ranch work. At 8, she could already ride better than most adults. James, at 5, had his father's patience with animals, could calm a spooked horse just by talking to it. Emma, at 3, was fearless and stubborn and constantly giving Celeste heart attacks by climbing things she had no business climbing. "She's you," Wyatt said after pulling Emma out of the hayloft for the 3rd time in 1 week. Same determination, same refusal to accept limitations. "I was never that reckless. You answered a mail-order marriage advertisement and traveled 2,000 miles to marry a stranger. That's pretty reckless." "That was calculated risk. There's a difference." "If you say so." He set Emma down, watched her run off toward the chicken coop. "But she's got your spirit. All of them do." It was true. The children carried pieces of both parents, Wyatt's steady patience, Celeste's fierce determination. Sarah had her father's dark eyes and her mother's sharp tongue. James had Celeste's blonde hair and Wyatt's quiet strength. Emma was all fire and stubbornness, a combination of the worst and best of both parents. When Sarah was 10, disaster struck again. Different from the winter storm, but just as devastating. It started with rustlers. They hit in the night, made off with 40 head of cattle before anyone knew what was happening. Wyatt discovered it at dawn, found the cut fence and fresh tracks leading west. "Sons of bitches," he said, staring at the damage. They knew exactly what they were doing. Planned it. He rode into Redemption, reported it to the sheriff. A useless gesture. By the time a posse could be organized, the rustlers would be 3 territories away. The cattle were gone. The money they represented was gone. Months of work disappeared in one night. "We'll recover," Celeste said, trying to stay calm, even as she mentally calculated how much this would set them back. "We've done it before. That was nature, bad weather, bad luck. This was theft. Someone deliberately taking what we built." His anger was cold, controlled, but she could see it burning underneath. "And there's nothing we can do about it." He was right. The sheriff investigated, found nothing useful. The tracks disappeared into rocky terrain, the cattle were gone, and that was that. They'd have to absorb the loss and move on. But it got worse. 2 weeks later, one of their wells went dry. Just stopped producing water. Wyatt dug deeper, hit rock. Tried the backup well. Found the water tasted wrong, alkaline, undrinkable. It's the drought, the neighbor told them when Wyatt rode over to ask if they were having similar problems. Worst I've seen in 20 years. Water tables dropping everywhere. Without reliable water, the cattle suffered. They had to drive them to the spring daily, which meant more labor, more time, more expense. Some of the weaker animals died. The herd that had been their pride and security started dwindling. Celeste watched Wyatt age 10 years in 2 months. He worked from before dawn until after dark, trying to solve problems that had no good solutions. He stopped smiling, stopped playing with the children, came to bed exhausted, and left before she woke. "You need to rest," she told him after finding him asleep in the barn one morning, slumped against a feed bin. "Can't rest, too much to do. You're going to kill yourself. Better than watching everything we built fall apart." He rubbed his face. "I promised you security, promised you'd never go hungry. And here we are on the edge of losing it all. We're not starving. The children are healthy. We still have the house, the land. For how long? If I can't water the cattle, can't keep the herd alive, what good is land?" He stood, moved past her. "I need to check the north fence." She let him go because arguing wouldn't help. But she worried. This was different from the winter storm. That had been random bad luck. This felt personal, targeted. The rustlers, then the wells, then a week later 3 cows got sick with something the vet couldn't identify. It was too much to be coincidence. She was proven right when they got the letter. Hand-delivered by a man in an expensive suit who rode up to the house in a fancy carriage. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, tipping his hat. "I'm representing the Arizona Cattle Company. We're interested in purchasing your ranch." "It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price. And given your recent difficulties, I thought you might be interested in hearing our offer." He named a figure. It was less than half what the ranch was worth. Celeste's blood went cold. "You're the ones behind this, the rustling, the wells." "I don't know what you're talking about. We're simply businessmen making a legitimate offer. Get off my property." "Mrs. Mercer, be reasonable. Your husband is struggling. The drought's killing your herd. You've got 3 children to feed. Our offer would give you enough to start fresh somewhere else." "I said get off my property. Now, before I get my rifle." The man smiled, unconcerned. "Think about it. The offer stands for 30 days. After that," he shrugged, "well, things might get even harder for you." He left. Celeste stood shaking with rage, watching the carriage disappear down the road. When Wyatt came in that evening, she told him everything. His face went dark. "They're trying to force us out." "Looks like it. Probably buying up all the ranches in the area. We're in their way. We don't sell." "I don't care what they do. We don't sell." "Agreed, but Wyatt, what if they keep sabotaging us? What if it gets worse?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then we fight harder. We don't quit. We didn't survive blizzards and rustlers and drought just to roll over for some suit from back east. But fighting was easier said than done. The harassment continued. Fences cut. Equipment broken. One of their ranch hands quit, said someone offered him double to work elsewhere. The other one got beaten up in town, warned to find new employment. They were alone again. Just Wyatt and Celeste against problems that felt overwhelming. "We need help," Celeste said one night after the children were in bed. "We can't do this alone." "Who's going to help?" "Everyone's either working for the cattle company or too scared to go against them." "Then we go over their heads. To the territorial governor. Make noise. Get attention." "You think some politician cares about one ranch in the middle of nowhere?" "No, but I think he cares about a company using intimidation and sabotage to force sales. That's illegal. If we can prove it how? We've got no evidence, just our word against theirs." Celeste thought about it. "Then we get evidence. We watch. We wait. And next time they try something, we catch them at it." So they watched. Wyatt stayed up nights, rifle across his lap, watching for rustlers. Celeste kept detailed records of every incident, every loss, every suspicious occurrence. They turned their ranch into a fortress. It took 3 weeks before the cattle company made their next move. 4 men rode up in broad daylight, announced they were claiming water rights to the spring. Said the Arizona Cattle Company owned the land it was on. "Like hell they do," Wyatt said. "I've got the deed. That spring is on my property." "Not according to our survey." The lead man pulled out a map. See? Property line runs here. Springs on company land. That's a fake map and you know it. Doesn't matter what I know. Matters what the law says. And the law says we own this spring. He smiled. Of course, we're reasonable men. For a fee, we might let you access it. How much? $50 a month. Wyatt's jaw clenched. $50 was more than they could afford, especially with their herd decimated. Without the spring, the cattle would die within weeks. I need time to think about it. You've got until tomorrow. After that, we fence it off. They left. Wyatt stood staring at the spring that had sustained the ranch for years, his face carved from stone. What do we do? Celeste asked. I'm going to Tucson, filing a complaint with the territorial authorities. This is fraud and theft, and I'm not letting it stand. That'll take weeks. We don't have weeks. Then we make do. Water the cattle from the house well. It'll be slow, exhausting, but it'll keep them alive until I get back. He left the next morning, riding hard for Tucson. Celeste was left alone with 3 children and a ranch under siege. The first day wasn't bad. She managed to water the cattle using buckets from the house well, though it took hours. The children helped, even Emma carrying small buckets without complaint. The second day, the cattle company fenced off the spring as promised. Celeste watched them do it, rifle in hand, but didn't interfere. Shooting someone would only make things worse. The third day, someone cut the fence to the north pasture. 20 cattle wandered off. By the time Celeste found them, 3 were dead from drinking bad water in an alkaline pool. The fourth day, she got a letter. Same expensive paper as before. The offer had dropped. They'd buy the ranch for 1/3 of what it was worth. Take it or leave it. Offer expired in 7 days. Celeste burned the letter in the stove. On the 5th day, Wyatt came back. He looked exhausted, covered in dust, but there was fire in his eyes. Filed complaints with the territorial governor, the land office, and the federal marshal. They're sending investigators. He dismounted, pulled her into a hard embrace. How bad did it get? Bad enough, but we survived. She told him about the fence, the dead cattle, the new offer. His face darkened. They're pushing hard. Must really want this land. Why though? It's just one ranch. Why target us specifically? I asked around in Tucson, did some digging. He led her inside, away from the children's ears. There's talk of a railroad coming through this area, line that'll connect Tucson to California. The route they're planning runs right through our North Valley. Understanding dawned. That's why they want the land. It's not about cattle. It's about the railroad. That's my guess. Ranch is worth 10 times what they're offering if there's a railroad involved, maybe more. So what do? We hold on, don't sell. The investigators should be here within 2 weeks. If we can just survive until then, we'll survive. Celeste said it with more confidence than she felt. We always do. But the cattle company wasn't done. 2 days later, the barn caught fire. Celeste woke to smoke and Sarah screaming. She ran outside to find flames already consuming the structure. Wyatt was trying to get the horses out, fighting panicked animals through smoke and heat. Get the children to safety, he yelled. Celeste herded all 3 children to the house, counted heads to make sure everyone was there, then ran back. The horses were out, but the barn was fully engulfed now. Years of hay feeding the flames, equipment burning, everything. They stood and watched it burn. There was nothing else to do. No water pressure to fight it, no help coming. Just them and the fire eating everything they'd built. When the sun came up, only smoking ruins remained. The barn was gone. The tack, the stored hay, the equipment, thousands of dollars in losses. Wyatt stood staring at the wreckage, and Celeste saw something break in him. Not completely, he was too strong for that, but a crack appeared in the foundation he'd built his life on. They win, he said quietly. We can't fight this. We're out of money, out of resources. The herd's dying. Now the barn's gone. He turned to her. We have to sell. Take what we can get and start over somewhere else. No. Celeste, no, we don't give up. We don't let them win. She grabbed his arm. You told me once you'd built this place with your own hands, that every board, every fence post, every acre meant something. You gonna let some suits from back east take that from you? It's not about me anymore. It's about the children. About you. I can't keep asking you to suffer for my pride. It's not pride. It's principle. She stepped closer. You remember what you told me that first day? That I'd never go hungry, never be cold, never be afraid? You kept those promises even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to break them. You kept them because that's who you are. This is different. It's not. It's the same. Standing your ground, fighting for what's yours, refusing to let fear or hardship make you quit. She met his eyes. I married a man who walked through a blizzard to save his cattle, who defended me to a whole town, who built something from nothing and refused to surrender even when everything went wrong. Don't tell me that man's going to quit now. He stared at her, and she watched something shift behind his eyes. The crack didn't disappear, but it stopped spreading. The investigators might not come in time. We might lose everything anyway. Then we lose it fighting, not surrendering. He pulled her close, held her tight. How'd I get so lucky to find you? You placed an advertisement. I answered it. Luck had nothing to do with it. They rebuilt the barn. It took 2 weeks of brutal work, Wyatt doing most of the construction with Celeste helping where she could. They used money they didn't have, bought materials on credit from a sympathetic merchant in Redemption who'd heard about their troubles. The children pitched in. Sarah, now 11, worked like an adult, carrying boards, hammering nails, never complaining. James hauled water until his small arms shook. Even Emma helped, sorting nails and bringing tools. The cattle company sent another letter. The offer was now a quarter of the original price. Take it, or face continued consequences. Wyatt burned this one too. On the day they finished the barn, smaller than before, rougher but functional, the federal investigators finally arrived. 2 serious men with badges and authority, asking questions, taking statements, examining the fake property maps. We've had complaints about the Arizona Cattle Company before, the lead investigator said. But nothing we could prove. You've kept good records, though. Very detailed. That helps. They stayed 3 days, interviewing neighbors, examining evidence, building a case. When they left, they warned Wyatt and Celeste it would take time. Legal processes move slowly. How much time? Wyatt asked. Months, maybe? Can you hold on that long? We'll hold on however long it takes. And they did. Through another hard winter, though not as brutal as the first, through continued harassment from the cattle company, subtle now, nothing the investigators could pin on them directly. Through drought and debt and days when Celeste wondered if they'd made the right choice. But they held on. The children grew. Sarah turned 12, then 13. She could handle cattle as well as any ranch hand now, rode fence with her father, helped make decisions about the herd. James grew quiet and steady, developing his father's patience and his mother's determination. Emma stayed wild and fearless, constantly testing boundaries. 2 years after the investigators left, the ruling came down. The Arizona Cattle Company was found guilty of fraud, intimidation, and illegal land seizure. They were ordered to pay substantial fines and restitution to affected ranchers. The fake property claims were invalidated. The spring was legally confirmed as belonging to the Triple M. The victory felt hollow after everything they'd lost, but it was still victory. They'd survived. They'd won. Now what? Celeste asked as they read the official documents. Now we rebuild. Again. For real this time. Wyatt looked at her. You still want to do this? Still want this life? Are you asking if I regret marrying you? I'm asking if you regret not taking one of those offers and running somewhere easier. She looked around the ranch, at the house they'd expanded, the barn they'd rebuilt, the land they'd fought for, at their children playing in the yard, strong and healthy and alive. No, she said. I don't regret a single second, hard or not. This is ours. We built it, and nothing worth having comes easy. He kissed her, and it felt like a renewal. A promise made again, kept again, despite everything trying to break them. The years that followed were better. The herd recovered. They expanded again, carefully this time. Wyatt's reputation grew. Not just for quality cattle, but for being a man who didn't quit, who'd fought off a powerful company and won. Other ranchers started coming to him for advice. Sarah grew into a young woman who could outride and outwork most men. She had offers of marriage from several young men in the territory, but she turned them all down. I'm not interested in being someone's property, she told her mother. I want to build something like you and Dad did, on my own terms. James, at 15, was quieter, but just as determined. He had a way with horses that bordered on magical, could train the wildest ones to be gentle as lambs. Emma, at 13, was still a handful. She'd announced she wanted to be a veterinarian, which was impossible for a girl, but Celeste wouldn't bet against her daughter achieving it anyway. Watching them grow, watching them become strong and capable and fierce, Celeste felt a pride that had nothing to do with the ranch or the cattle or the land they'd fought for. This was her real legacy. These children who knew their worth, who refused to quit, who'd learned from watching their parents fight for what mattered. One evening, with all 3 children gone to town for a social, Wyatt and Celeste sat on the porch like they had so many times before. 20 years, Wyatt said, since you stepped off that stagecoach. 20 years of hell and hardship and happiness. She leaned against him. Would you do it again? Knowing everything that would happen? Every single second of it. He kissed her forehead. You? Every second. Even the parts where I wanted to strangle you. There were parts where you wanted to strangle me? That first winter when you walked out into the blizzard and nearly died? I was planning your murder for being that stupid. He laughed. Fair. I earned that. He was quiet for a moment. You know what I think about sometimes? That day you arrived, how close I came to sending you back. You never would have. I thought about it. For about 3 seconds, I looked at you standing there in torn clothes, exhausted and scared, and I thought maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe this was too much. He shook his head. Then I remembered your letters, remembered the woman who asked about stars and loneliness, and I knew, torn dress or not, you were exactly who I'd been looking for. I was a mess. You were brave. You still are. He pulled her closer. Look at what we built. Not just the ranch, though that too, but our family, our life. You did that. We did that. She looked out at the land bathed in sunset gold, at the house full of memories, at the life they'd carved from harsh desert and hard work and love that had grown despite every reason it shouldn't have. Yeah, she said, we did. And sitting there with Wyatt's arm around her, Celeste Mercer, who'd once been a starving girl in a St. Louis boarding house with no future and less hope, felt something she'd never expected to feel. Complete. The completeness didn't last. Nothing ever does. Not really. Life has a way of reminding you that peace is temporary, that comfort breeds complacency, that the moment you think you've got everything figured out is when the universe laughs and throws something new at you. Sarah married at 23. Not one of the local ranch boys who'd been circling her for years, but a surveyor from back east named Thomas Chen who came through mapping the new railroad extension. He was smart, respectful, and completely unafraid of Sarah's sharp tongue and sharper will. The wedding was small, held at the ranch with half of Redemption in attendance. Mrs. Bartlett, now ancient and still sour, attended just to complain about mixed marriages and the degradation of proper society. Some things never change, Celeste muttered, watching the old woman purse her lips. Let her talk, Wyatt said. She's been miserable for 70 years, not going to start being happy now. Sarah and Thomas settled in Tucson, where Thomas had work, but they visited often. Within 2 years, they'd given Wyatt and Celeste their first grandchild, a boy named Daniel who had his grandmother's blonde hair and his grandfather's dark eyes. James never married. He stayed at the ranch, took over more of the daily operations as Wyatt's back started giving him trouble. At 25, James was quiet, capable, and content with horses and cattle and the occasional trip to town. Not everyone needs a spouse to be complete, he told his mother when she gently suggested he might want to start looking. I'm happy as I am. Celeste understood that. Some people were meant to be alone, and there was nothing wrong with it. James had found his peace in the land and the animals. That was enough. Emma, true to her childhood promises, went east to study. Not veterinary medicine, they wouldn't accept women, but nursing with a focus on animal care. She wrote letters full of frustration about professors who told her women didn't have the constitution for medical work, about classmates who treated her like a novelty. But she persisted. Graduated at the top of her class, came home to Arizona and opened the territory's first veterinary practice run by a woman, daring anyone to say she couldn't. That's my daughter, Wyatt said proudly when Emma treated her first horse, a difficult gelding with colic that 3 male vets had given up on. Emma saved it. The years passed with relentless speed. Celeste turned 40, then 45. Her blonde hair started showing gray. Her hands developed calluses that never quite went away, and arthritis that made mornings difficult. But she was healthy, strong, still capable of a full day's work when needed. Wyatt aged harder. The years of brutal labor caught up with him. His back, injured during the blizzard rescue decades ago, got worse. Some mornings he could barely stand. His hands, broken and rebroken from ranch work, ached in cold weather. At 55, he looked 10 years older. "You need to slow down," Celeste told him after finding him collapsed in the barn, his back having seized up while lifting hay bales. "Can't slow down. Ranch doesn't run itself." "James can handle more. He's been ready for years." "I know, He stopped, struggling with words he didn't want to say. "If I stop working, what am I? The ranch is who I am." "No, the ranch is what you do. Who you are is the man who saw beauty in a starving girl when everyone else saw failure, who built a family from nothing, who taught 3 children that quitting wasn't an option." She helped him stand. "That doesn't change whether you're working 18-hour days or taking it easier." He tried to slow down. He really did. But habits built over 40 years don't break easily. He still woke before dawn, still checked on cattle personally, still insisted on being involved in every major decision. Then came the heart attack. It happened on a Tuesday morning in late spring. Wyatt was saddling his horse, getting ready to ride out to check the north pasture. Celeste was in the kitchen when she heard the crash. She ran out to find him on the barn floor, clutching his chest, his face gray. "James!" she screamed. "Get the wagon! Now!" The ride to redemption was the longest of Celeste's life. Wyatt drifted in and out of consciousness, each breath rattling. She held his hand the entire way, talking to him constantly, even when he couldn't respond. "Don't you dare die on me, Wyatt Mercer. Don't you dare. We've got grandchildren to spoil, and years left, and I'm not doing this alone. You hear me? You fight. Like you fought that blizzard, like you fought the cattle company. You fight." Doc Harrison, old now but still practicing, worked on Wyatt for 3 hours. When he finally emerged from the examination room, his face was grave. "He's alive. Stable, for now. But it was a significant cardiac event. His heart's damaged." "What does that mean?" Celeste asked, though she already knew. "It means he needs to stop working. Complete rest for at least 6 months. Even then, he'll never be able to do what he used to. The exertion could kill him." "He won't stop. You know he won't." "Then you make him. Because if he keeps going the way he has been, he'll be dead within a year." Doc Harrison put a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Celeste, but that's the truth." She sat with Wyatt in the hospital room, a converted storage area in the back of Doc Harrison's office, and watched him sleep. His face was slack, older than she'd ever seen it. The gray in his hair had turned to white over the past year. His hands, once so strong, looked fragile on the blanket. This was the man who'd defended her to an entire town, who'd built a ranch from nothing, who'd survived blizzards and droughts and corporate sabotage. Seeing him brought low by his own body felt wrong, cruel. When he woke hours later, his first words were, "The cattle need—" "James is handling it. Everything's handled." She gripped his hand. "You scared the hell out of me." "Sorry." His voice was weak. "How bad?" "Bad enough that Doc Harrison says you need to stop working. Complete rest." "That's not going to happen." "Yes, it is. Because I'm not losing you. Not now. Not after everything we survived together." Her voice cracked. "You don't get to die on me, Wyatt. I won't allow it." He tried to smile. "Didn't know death needed your permission." "It does, and I'm not giving it." They kept him in redemption for a week. Sarah came from Tucson with Thomas and little Daniel. Emma rode in from her practice in Phoenix. The family gathered, everyone pretending Wyatt wasn't as sick as he was, that this was just a temporary setback. But Celeste saw the truth in her children's eyes. They knew. They were preparing themselves for loss. When Doc Harrison finally released Wyatt with strict orders for rest and limited activity, James drove them home in the wagon. Wyatt was quiet the entire ride, staring out at the land he'd worked for 40 years. "It's still yours," Celeste said quietly. "The ranch, the land. Nothing's taking that away. Feels like it already has. What good is owning land if you can't work it? You'll work it differently. Through James, through advice and planning instead of physical labor." She took his hand. Your value isn't in how many fence posts you can dig or cattle you can rope. It's in what you built, what you created. That doesn't disappear because your body can't do what it used to. He wanted to argue. She could see it in his face, but he was too tired, too sick. So he just nodded and let her help him into the house. The months that followed were hard in different ways than the hardships they'd faced before. Wyatt struggled with inactivity, would try to sneak out to work, only to be caught by Celeste or James and ordered back inside. He was restless, frustrated, angry at his own limitations. I hate this, he said one evening, watching through the window as James directed the ranch hands. Sitting here useless while everyone else works. You're not useless. James asks your advice every single day. The decisions are still yours. It's not the same. No, it's different, but different doesn't mean worthless. She sat beside him. You spent 40 years building this place with your hands. Now you get to watch it continue. Watch your son run it the way you taught him. See your grandchildren grow up here. That's not nothing, Wyatt. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm scared. The admission shocked her. In 30 years of marriage, through every disaster and hardship, she'd never heard him say those words. Of what? Of dying without being ready, of leaving you alone, of, he stopped, swallowed hard, of not mattering anymore, of becoming irrelevant. You could never be irrelevant. Not to me, not to our children, not to anyone who knows what you built here. She took his hand. You matter, Wyatt. You always will, heart condition or not. Slowly, painfully, he adjusted. Started spending mornings reviewing accounts and planning instead of riding fence. Taught Daniel, now 5, how to recognize different cattle breeds. Sat on the porch in the evenings with Celeste, watching the sunsets he'd never had time to appreciate before. It's not terrible, he admitted one evening. Being still, watching instead of doing. Told you. Don't gloat. It's unbecoming. She laughed. After all these years, he could still make her laugh. They settled into new rhythms. Wyatt's health stabilized. Not perfect, but manageable. He had good days and bad days. On good days, he'd walk around the property with a cane, checking on things, offering advice. On bad days, he'd stay in bed, frustrated but accepting. Celeste aged alongside him. Her arthritis got worse. Her hair went fully gray, then white. At 50, she looked it. No pretending otherwise. But she was still strong, still capable, still running the household, still making decisions alongside Wyatt. More grandchildren came. Sarah had 3 more. Emma married another veterinarian and had twins. Even James, who everyone thought would stay a bachelor forever, surprised them by marrying a widow from Redemption and taking on her 2 children as his own. The ranch house, once too quiet for one lonely man, now rang with grandchildren's voices during visits. Celeste would watch them play in the dirt, climb trees, chase chickens, and feel a satisfaction that went bone deep. This was legacy. Not the land or the cattle, but these children carrying forward the lessons she and Wyatt had learned through decades of hard living. When Wyatt turned 65, the whole family gathered for a celebration. All the children, all the grandchildren, half the territory it seemed. They roasted a steer, made enough food for an army, told stories late into the night. Celeste watched Wyatt surrounded by family, his son, his daughters, his grandchildren, and saw him truly happy. Not working hard happy or surviving crisis happy, but content, at peace. Thank you, he said that night as they lay in bed, exhausted from the day's festivities. For what? For answering my advertisement, for stepping off that stagecoach, for not giving up when things got hard. He turned to face her, for building this life with me. Thank you for seeing past the torn dress and the dirt, for treating me like I mattered when no one else did. She touched his face. For keeping your promises. Which ones? All of them. You said I'd never be hungry, never be cold, never be afraid. You kept those promises for 33 years. I'll keep them until I can't anymore. She knew what he meant, that his time was limited, that the heart attack had been a warning, that eventually his damaged heart would give out. But she didn't want to think about that. Not tonight. Not with the house full of family and the future stretching ahead of them. The years continued their relentless march. Celeste turned 55, then 60. Wyatt turned 70. They were old now, undeniably. Their bodies hurt. Their memories sometimes failed, but they were together. James ran the ranch with quiet competence. It had grown under his leadership, more cattle, better facilities, a reputation that extended beyond Arizona. He'd taken what his father built and expanded it, made it sustainable for future generations. Sarah's husband had become a successful surveyor and investor. They lived comfortably in Tucson, visited often. Their children were growing. Daniel was 14 now, talking about becoming a rancher like his grandfather. Emma's veterinary practice thrived. She'd trained 2 other women, was pushing for formal education programs for female veterinarians. She fought constantly against old men who told her women weren't suited for the work, and she won more often than she lost. "She gets that from you," Wyatt told Celeste, watching Emma argue with a territorial legislator about licensing requirements. "She gets it from both of us. Your stubbornness, my refusal to accept limitations. Dangerous combination. The best kind." On a cool evening in November, Wyatt had his second heart attack. Smaller than the first, but still serious. Doc Harrison, now ancient himself and training a replacement, was blunt. "This is the warning, Wyatt. Next one might be the last one. Get your affairs in order." Wyatt nodded calmly, like they were discussing weather. But Celeste saw the fear in his eyes when they were alone. "I'm not ready," he said quietly. "I know. There's so much I still want to do, want to see. Daniel's growing up so fast, Sarah's pregnant again, Emma's opening a second practice. I want to see all of it. Then fight, like you always have. I'm tired of fighting." The admission broke her heart. This man who'd never quit anything was tired, worn down, ready to rest. "Then rest. But don't give up. Not yet. Not until you absolutely have to." He lasted another 3 years. 3 years of declining health, increasing pain, but also moments of joy. He saw Daniel turn 17 and decide to work the ranch, saw Sarah's 5th child born, saw Emma's practice expand to 3 locations, saw James's stepchildren call him dad without hesitation. He was there for all of it, even when being there was difficult, even when the pain was bad. He showed up because that's what he'd always done. The end came on a spring morning. Wyatt woke early, as always, kissed Celeste, said he loved her. Then he walked out to the porch to watch the sunrise. When Celeste came out an hour later with coffee, she found him in his chair, eyes closed, face peaceful. Gone. The funeral was enormous. People came from all over the territory, ranchers he'd helped, neighbors he'd supported, people whose lives he'd touched in ways large and small. The cemetery in Redemption overflowed. Celeste stood at the graveside, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and said goodbye to the man who'd saved her life by seeing her worth when no one else did. "He was a good man," Sarah said quietly. "The best," James agreed. Emma just held her mother's hand, too emotional to speak. Celeste didn't cry. She'd done her crying in private. Out here, in public, she stood strong. Wyatt would have wanted that, would have expected it. After everyone left, after the crowds dispersed, Celeste stayed. She stood at the grave, looking at the marker they'd chosen. Simple, like Wyatt himself. His name, his dates, and one line, "He built a life from nothing and made it mean something." "I kept my promise too," she said quietly. "I stayed. I fought. I built this life with you, and I'll keep going because that's what we do. We don't quit." She turned and walked back to the wagon where James waited. The months after Wyatt's death were strange. The house felt empty in ways it hadn't since before they married. Celeste would wake expecting to find him beside her, would start to tell him something before remembering he was gone. But she didn't break. She'd survived too much to break now. She stayed at the ranch, helped James run things, spoiled her grandchildren, corresponded regularly with Sarah and Emma. She filled her days with work and family and purpose. People told her she should slow down. Take it easy. She was 70 years old, a widow, entitled to rest. She ignored them. Rest was for people who had nothing left to do. She still had plenty. When Daniel asked to learn ranch management, Celeste taught him the account books. When Sarah's youngest daughter wanted to hear stories about the old days, Celeste told them, the good and the bad, the triumphs and failures. When Emma needed advice about expanding her business, Celeste offered the lessons learned from 40 years of building something from nothing. She was needed. That mattered. Years passed. Celeste turned 75, then 80. Her body betrayed her more frequently. arthritis that made walking difficult, hearing that faded, eyesight that dimmed, but her mind stayed sharp. Her will stayed strong. She outlived Doc Harrison, Mrs. Bartlett, most of the people who'd been in redemption that day. She arrived in torn clothes. The town itself changed, grew, modernized, became something different from the rough frontier settlement it had been. But the ranch stayed the same in the ways that mattered. Still family-run, still productive, still the triple M that Wyatt had built from empty desert and stubbornness. When Celeste turned 85, the family threw another celebration. Smaller than Wyatt's 65th, she didn't want the fuss, but meaningful. 4 children, 13 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, all of them carrying pieces of her and Wyatt forward. Sarah stood to make a toast. To my mother, who survived things that would have destroyed most people, who built a life from rags and determination, who showed us all that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every single time. Everyone raised their glasses. Celeste waved them off. I just did what needed doing, same as anyone. No, Emma said firmly, not same as anyone, better than most. You set a standard, Mama. We're all still trying to live up to it. That night, alone in the house she'd shared with Wyatt for so many years, Celeste sat on the porch, the same porch they'd sat on countless times, talking about everything and nothing. She could almost feel him there beside her. We did good, didn't we? She said to the empty air. Built something that lasted, something that mattered. The wind moved through the cottonwoods, and she chose to believe it was his answer. Celeste died in her sleep 2 weeks after her 86th birthday. Peaceful, in her own bed, in the house she'd made a home. They buried her next to Wyatt. The marker matched his, simple, direct, honest. Her name, her dates, and one line, she arrived with nothing and left a legacy. The ranch continued. James ran it until he couldn't anymore, then passed it to Daniel. It stayed in the family, as Wyatt and Celeste had always hoped. Their great-great-grandchildren would one day walk the same land they'd fought for, worked, built their lives around. The story of the lonely rancher and the ragged bride became legend in the territory. People told it to their children, who told it to theirs. Details changed over time, got embellished, became more romance than reality. But the core truth remained. 2 desperate people took a chance on each other. They built something from nothing. They survived every hardship thrown at them through stubbornness, partnership, and refusal to quit. They created a family, a home, a legacy that would outlast them both. They proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. That kindness matters more than comfort. That seeing someone's worth when others don't is the greatest gift you can give. Celeste Whitaker had stepped off a stagecoach in 1878, wearing torn clothes, starving, humiliated, certain her life was over. She'd been wrong. Her life was just beginning. She'd married a stranger who became her partner. She'd turned a harsh desert ranch into a thriving home. She'd raised children who were strong because she'd been strong, who were brave because she'd been brave, who knew their worth because she'd learned hers. She'd gone from a girl who had nothing to a woman who had everything that mattered. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.